Chapter 1256. In the hearts of ordinary people, dimensional creatures were still life forms that humans couldn't reach. After all, there was only one human emperor, and most of them were ordinary people. Is there a way to go over? Fei Luo looked at Zhou, feeling uneasy, afraid that Zhou would shake his head. Zhou remained unperturbed as he looked at the Ice Maiden and asked, "What do you think?" The Ice Maiden replied, "Even if the flower race descends to the human world, it's impossible for them to be experts at the flower monarch level. Furthermore, they will be greatly suppressed by Earth's laws. They shouldn't pose much of a threat." Everyone wore odd expressions when they heard the Ice Maiden's relaxed tone. This was because the Ice Maiden's tone was too boastful. It was like an ordinary person eating a bowl of noodles in a noodle shop on the street and suddenly hearing someone eating peanuts and noodles discussing if they should buy a few aircraft carriers this year. Grim Demon added, "It's just a mere flower race. If they dare block our way, just kill them. Why speak so much nonsense?" "In that case, let's go," Zhou said as he carried Ur and demonic neonate to the greenhouse. Fei Luo gritted his teeth and followed. The others were somewhat hesitant and didn't dare follow them. The elder coughed dryly. "Fei Luo, be careful. Don't force yourself. Lucas isn't around, and there's nothing fun in this world. At most, death is death." "It's nothing," Fei Luo said as he strode forward and followed closely behind Zhou. Lucas had said that Zhou was the most trustworthy person he had ever seen. Since Lucas believed in Zhou, Fei Luo was willing to believe in him as well. Furthermore, she had no other choice. Apart from Zhou, probably no one dared to take her to the time cabin. The elder and his companions watched from afar. No one dared to follow. It wasn't because they were cowardly and afraid of death. They all had their own families. Many of them were the breadwinners of their families, so they didn't dare risk their lives. When they approached the canyon, the petals swayed gently like a breeze. They looked beautiful. Ordinary people would only find it beautiful, but Zhou, Ice Maiden, and Grim Demon saw crystalline flower pistils extend out of the greenhouse and attack them. The pistils were like snakes. Their bodies were slender, but their heads could open into 4 petals like the mouths of monsters. Without waiting for Zhou to take action, Grim Demon, who was already feeling itchy from boredom, rushed forward. Demonic aura condensed into a saber and instantly sliced apart the flower pistils that extended out. The severed stamen lost its power and fell to the ground. "He's at the terror grade." The young man looked at Grim Demon in horror. This was because Grim Demon looked like an attendant when he followed Zhou, but he never expected him to have such terrifying strength. The elder looked at Grim Demon in thought as though he had thought of something, but he wasn't sure. He asked the red-nosed man beside him, "Big Nose, do you find that fellow familiar?" "Now that you mention it, I do have some, but I can't remember where I've seen them before," Big Nose said after some thought. "You think so too? Then don't you think he looks like the Guardian who showed invincibility in the Magic Cube battle 5 years ago?" The old man said again. 5 years ago. Guardian. Ah! Big Nose exclaimed as though he had figured it out. That's right. He looks very similar. That Guardian's name is Grim Demon, right? He seems to be with Human Emperor. Yes, that's right. It's him, the elder nodded. You think so too? That's right. I never expected to see him here. 5 years ago, he was already a top Guardian. 5 years later, he will probably only be stronger. It's no wonder he's not afraid of dimensional creatures. It's said that Grim Demon is Human Emperor's servant. Now that he's with Zhou, could Zhou be? Big Nose widened his eyes in disbelief as he watched Zhou walk to the greenhouse. That's impossible. How old is he? He was probably in his teens 5 years ago. It's impossible for him to be Human Emperor. The elder's son understood what Big Nose was saying and found it impossible. That's right. If he were a little older, he might really be Human Emperor. However, even if he isn't Human Emperor, He definitely has a great background to be treated like this by a guardian like Grim Demon. Perhaps the elders in his family are related to Human Emperor, the elder said. Big Nose and company thought so as well. It was no wonder they made such a guess. 5 years ago, Zhouwen was just too young. No one believed that a teenager could reach that stage and kill Tian, who was like the ruler of the universe. Grim Demon unleashed his might as his demonic aura transformed into a 100-meter-long saber. He slashed at the greenhouse in the valley, hoping to split it apart and carve out a path to the heavens. As though sensing Grim Demon's terror, the greenhouse in the valley shook violently. Flower pistils that resembled snakes of light extended out and swept towards the demonic aura saber. However, under Grim Demon's overwhelming demonic aura, the flower pistils were sliced apart. The dense flower pistils failed to block the demonic aura saber and were all sliced apart. Crack! The demonic aura saber slashed at the petal, forcefully leaving a huge crack on it. Just as the indomitable demonic saber was about to strike the bottom of the petal, it was finally blocked. Zhouwen focused his gaze and saw a flower fairy-like girl sitting cross-legged in the flower pistils. Her eyes were like flower petals that emitted a silver glow. Her clothes were translucent like a heavenly robe. A pair of jade-like hands blocked Grim Demon's demonic aura saber. Even someone as powerful as Grim Demon couldn't continue slashing. The girl held the demonic aura saber with both hands and slowly stood up. Her legs were slender and straight. As she moved, the greenhouse closed in, transforming into a flowery dress that gathered on the girl's body, making her look even more beautiful and noble. Killing intent flashed in Grim Demon's eyes as the demonic aura on his body constantly surged into the demonic saber, making it stronger and stronger. However, he ultimately failed to slash down. "Do you know her?" Zhouwen asked Ice Maiden. "I don't know her, but she's definitely from the flower race," Ice Maiden said. "That's good." Zhouwen condensed sword pill and shot it at the flower woman. The flower woman was fighting Grim Demon with all her might, so she didn't have the strength to deal with sword pill. Her chest was penetrated by sword pill and her body slammed into the mountain wall behind her. Fei Luo and company couldn't see the Terragrade battle. All they saw was Grim Demon charging at the greenhouse before it vanished. When Zhouwen waved his hand, the mountain wall collapsed. A beautiful woman's chest was pierced through by a crystalline sword and nailed to the mountain wall. He's indeed a Terragrade existence. He's still so young. The elder sighed softly. Fei Luo was overjoyed as he thought to himself, Lucas really didn't lie to me. Zhouwen is too strong. He might really be able to save Lucas. Chapter 1257. Transparent blood constantly flowed out of the flower woman's chest as her clothes gradually withered. She couldn't even open her eyelids. It looked like she was about to die. Zhouwen wanted to walk over to see if he could pick up anything from her. After all, she came from a dimension. There might be some treasures on her. The Ice Maiden also walked over with Zhouwen. Just as Zhouwen was about to plunder something, the Ice Maiden saw something on the flower woman's neck. Her pupils suddenly constricted as she anxiously said to Zhouwen, "Don't let her die. Quickly save her." "What's wrong? Do you know her?" Zhouwen looked at the Ice Maiden in puzzlement. He had already asked her, but she had clearly said that she didn't know her. "No, there's no time to explain. Save her first. Don't let her die. I'll explain to you later." The Ice Maiden looked very anxious. It was rare for Zhouwen to see the Ice Maiden have such an expression. Furthermore, the flower woman was indeed on the brink of death. If he didn't save her now, it would be too late. He didn't have the time to ask further. After some thought, Zhouwen pulled out the sword pill. At the same time, he used the power of Human Emperor. At the moment the flower woman landed, he mercilessly punched her chest, creating a fist-shaped hole in the wound that had already been pierced by the sword. Fei Luo looked at Zhouwen in puzzlement. She had clearly heard the Ice Maiden ask Zhouwen to save her, but he had been ruthless. The others also looked at Zhou in puzzlement. Zhou punched through the flower woman's chest and slammed her body into the mountain wall, shattering a large portion of it. However, the next scene left Fei Luo and company widen their eyes. The wound on the flower woman's chest that had been punched through by Zhou healed at a discernible speed. In a moment it was as good as new. Just as the flower woman recovered, the Ice Maiden used her powers of ice to freeze her and seal her in ice. Zhou looked at the Ice Maiden, unsure what she meant. She wanted to save her and seal her. The Ice Maiden used a strange ability to transmit her voice into Zhou's ears. No one else could hear her. I'm afraid we're in big trouble. Without waiting for Zhou to press, the Ice Maiden continued, this flower woman has the flower goddess's tear on her. She must have an extremely close relationship with the flower goddess. If we kill her, the flower goddess will be enraged. When that happens, we will probably face an unpredictable horror. But we can't let her go. We treated her like that and almost killed her. If we let her go, she'll hold a grudge against us, and we'll be in even more trouble. Flower God. Zhou didn't know what kind of existence Flower Goddess was, but from Ice Maiden's expression, she seemed to have an extremely high status in the dimension. The Ice Maiden explained in a voice that only Zhou could hear, among the apocalyptic experts of the dimension, Flower Goddess can be ranked in the top 5. Furthermore, there are many experts in the flower race. If they were to forcefully descend without a care for anything, it would be a calamity that would wipe out all life. Zhou used his spatial powers to send his voice into the Ice Maiden's ears. Will the flower goddess disregard everything for a clansman who has entered Earth? She should have paid a huge price, right? According to what Zhou knew, the clansmen that the dimension had sent to Earth in recent years were all cannon fodder. Most of them were only guardians and not pure dimensional creatures. The Ice Maiden said with a bitter smile, the bad thing is that this flower woman isn't an ordinary flower. Something like the flower goddess's tear is extremely rare among the flower race. Only a few very special flower races have been bestowed with the flower goddess's tear. If the flower race with the flower goddess's tear is threatened, the flower goddess will be able to sense it. This is the final defense to protect their lives. As this is Earth, it's too isolated from the dimension, so the flower goddess might not have sensed it. However, once she dies, the flower goddess will definitely sense it. When that happens, it will be troublesome. Even if she can sense it, she won't know who killed her, right? Zhou frowned. If only it were that simple. That flower goddess's tear isn't simple. Although I've only heard of it and don't know the exact uses of the flower goddess's tear, it's impossible for us to not be discovered if we kill her. At least in the dimension, no one dares to kill a flower race with the flower goddess's tear. The Ice Maiden was abnormally disgusted. She didn't expect that the flower race she fought on Earth would have the flower god's tear. Why would the flower race, who had the tear of the flower goddess, come to Earth? There were billions of flower clansmen, and there were plenty of cannon fodder. She never expected such a fellow to come. Then what should we do? Zhou didn't like trouble, and this was clearly a huge problem. How would I know? We definitely can't kill her, but it's not good to let her go either. After a pause, the Ice Maiden continued, how about this? Let's bring her along and see if we can think of a way to convince her to join us. What kind of people are the flower race with the flower goddess's tear? This one doesn't seem very strong, Zhou asked after some thought. A future flower goddess, a junior of the flower race that the flower goddess values, or even the flower goddess's biological daughter. This is all possible. I've only heard of it and have never seen it before. How would I know which one it is? The Ice Maiden felt disgusted as though she had eaten a fly. Then let's bring her along for now. Zhou casually waved his hand and stored the frozen flower woman into the chaos bead. However, Zhou wasn't too worried. If the dimension could conquer Earth so easily, they would have long taken it for themselves. Why would they wait until today and cause so much trouble? No matter how strong the flower goddess was, it wasn't that easy for her to descend to earth. However, this flower woman could be spared. Such an important figure might be able to obtain more information about the dimension. "Let's go to the time cabin," Zhouwen said as he continued walking forward. Killing and saving people with a wave of his hand was truly shocking. The elder ran over with his men and continued leading the way for Zhouwen and company. He didn't dare be negligent, but his words and actions were much more reserved. Even when Fei Luo spoke to Zhouwen, he didn't dare speak as casually as before. The Ice Maiden didn't say a word along the way. She was having a headache over how to deal with the flower woman. She had beaten her up so badly the moment she arrived. It didn't seem easy to get her to not bear a grudge. Nothing major happened along the way. The elder who was the guide and his subordinates could resolve some minor problems. They were very familiar with this place. After traveling for 2 to 3 hours, Zhouwen finally saw the legendary time cabin. Chapter 1258. The time cabin really lives up to its reputation. Zhouwen looked at the time cabin and finally knew why it had this name. On a big tree in the forest, there was an inconspicuous treehouse. The materials used to build the treehouse were logs from the forest. On the treehouse, there were plants that looked like creepers, making the entire wooden house look full of vitality. If it wasn't for the fact that Fei Luo and company were certain that this was the time cabin, Zhouwen would have thought that this was a temporary residence built by a hunter. It was too small. From the outside, it looked like it could only accommodate 2 to 3 adults. The door of the cabin was made of wooden planks, and it looked like there were many gaps. There was a signboard with tree bark hanging on the door. It wasn't shaped, but one could see the bug eyes and growth rings. On the signboard, there was a line of words, "Sweet Wooden House." Zhouwen had seen these words on the internet before. Many people were guessing the meaning of the word sweet, but after thinking through all sorts of Western myths, they couldn't figure out what sweet was. Some people guessed that sweet was the name of a certain creature, and that the time cabin belonged to it. Some people also guessed that to mythical creatures, the time cabin was like candy. Some people guessed that there was some kind of candy hidden in this wooden hut that could immediately advance to the mythical stage after eating it. There were all sorts of guesses, but no one knew why it was given such a name. People were more used to calling it time cabin. After all, the name Sweet Wooden House wasn't suitable for such a terrifying place. It didn't sound good. Zhouwen sized up the wooden hut and wasn't in a rush to enter. It was useless to be anxious. Lucas had been missing for 4 years. If he was dead, he would have died long ago. Even if he wasn't dead, there was no need to be in a rush. He circled the wooden hut, hoping to find the tiny palm symbol. Entering a place like the time cabin in reality was equivalent to risking one's life. If one's luck wasn't good, one might not even be able to come out of the terrorgrade. Even a time elemental expert like Cave Era had to buy spatial skill crystals from others instead of entering the time cabin to drop them. It was obvious how terrifying this place was. Suddenly, Zhouwen was delighted. He discovered the tiny palm symbol on the wooden plank on the roof of the time cabin. The tiny palm symbol was engraved on the bark of the wooden plank. Under the wind and rain, it became somewhat blurry, like a child's scribbles. Zhouwen took out his phone and took a picture of the tiny palm symbol supporting the wooden hut. The phone immediately entered the download screen. He then pretended to take a few to other places. "Are we going in now?" She knew that she wasn't capable enough, but she had planned on entering this time. If she couldn't find Lucas, she hoped to quickly spend the rest of her life in the time cabin. "Let's not enter for now. We need to make some preparations." Zhouwen planned on waiting for the time cabin dungeon to download before entering in-game to take a look. It was such a dangerous place. If he casually brought people in, not only would he not be able to save Lucas, but he would also lose so many lives. That would go against the original intention of saving people. "Thank you for bringing us. 1122222222 to cabin. 2222222222. Thank you for bringing us here. If you have something on, you can leave now, Zhou said to the elder. The elder hurriedly said, "There's no rush. The strange forest is unpredictable. The way we came will be different when we return. Only people who are very familiar with it can rely on experience to find the way out. We'll wait for you and Pharaoh to save Lucas before taking you out." Just as Zhou was about to say something, he suddenly frowned and looked deeper into the strange forest. After watching for a while, Zhou turned around and asked the elder, "Are there any animal-type dimensional creatures in the strange forest?" "No, I don't think so. They're basically plant-type dimensional creatures. We've never seen animal-type dimensional creatures. Only the time cabin has some animal-shaped dimensional creatures, but they aren't real animals, but animal-shaped puppets," the elder said. "That's strange." Zhou looked deep into the strange forest as his expression turned solemn. He heard a strange panting sound. With his hearing, he could only hear a faint panting sound. Furthermore, it gave him an extremely dangerous feeling that made his heart palpitate. "The strange forest isn't peaceful. It's best you return first," Zhou said to the elder. Although he didn't know where it was, Zhou was certain that there was definitely a terrifying creature in the strange forest. Just because the creature hadn't appeared didn't mean that it wouldn't appear. Furthermore, Zhou had a vague feeling that the creature was spying on them. This was just a feeling. Zhou couldn't determine where the creature was. "Don't worry about that. My father has been walking the strange forest for decades, but he has never encountered an animal-type creature. Instead, there are some plant-type dimensional creatures that can move. The most common is the demonic tree. Their roots can move through the soil and rocks," the elder's son said as he summoned a demonic tree companion beast. As the elder's son spoke, he summoned a demonic tree companion beast. It looked like a strange tree with eyes. Its trunk was as thick as a water tank. "It's not a demonic tree. It should be some kind of animal." Zhou shook his head slightly. He was certain that the panting sound was that of an animal. Most of these people had been in the strange forest for at least 10 years. They had never seen any animal-type dimensional creatures, so they naturally didn't believe Zhou's words. However, they didn't dare refute Zhou's words. They only felt that Zhou didn't want to use them. The elder smiled and said, "Then we'll head back first. I'm afraid it's too late now." Zhou stared into the depths of the forest as his expression turned solemn. He could already sense that the panting was approaching. However, he didn't discover any traces of the creature. With his perception, he could only hear the sound of panting approaching, but he couldn't discover the other party. This made him extremely vigilant. The elders were somewhat puzzled, unsure what Zhou meant. Grim Demon and Ice Maiden also sensed something as they looked around. They also heard the panting, but just like Zhou, they couldn't tell where it came from. Yer leaned into Zhou's embrace as though she was afraid. Demonic Neonate wasn't afraid at all. Her large eyes stared deep into the forest as though she was looking at something. Boom! The ground quaked as a large number of trees in the distance snapped. Rows of trees fell like dominoes as they crashed over. Chapter 1259. As large swathes of trees fell, an empty space appeared in the forest. Fei Luo and company also heard the repressed panting, but they couldn't see anything. A terror creature? The elder's expression changed slightly. However, Zhou, Ice Maiden, and company knew that things weren't that simple. If Xing Fang was an ordinary terror-grade creature, they would have long seen him. But now they still couldn't see anything. All they could hear was the panting constantly echoing in their ears. It was as though he was a beast with bloodshot eyes that were choosing people to devour. Grim Demon erupted with a terrifying demonic aura as it surged towards the empty space in the forest like a tidal wave. He probably didn't see the other party, and wanted to use this method to force him out. However, after the surging demonic aura, all the trees and flowers were pulverized, but they still didn't discover the other party's ruins. Only the extremely repressed breathing sounds could be heard from time to time, almost driving them crazy. Zhouwen had long activated Great Brahma and had been observing his surroundings, but he didn't discover anything. Grim Demon's combat experience was rather rich. After failing his first probe, he immediately launched a second attack. However, this time, he didn't use a large-scale demonic aura. Instead, he roared at the sky and let out a demonic voice that carried a murderous aura. The demonic voice spread in all directions. When the elder, Fei Luo, and company heard the demonic voice, they immediately covered their ears and fell to the ground. Soon, they began to bleed from their 7 orifices as they rolled around in pain and screamed. If this continued and he didn't find his opponent, everyone on his side would probably die. Zhouwen had no choice but to get Grim Demon to stop his demonic voice attack. Grim Demon had no choice but to stop and say with a frown, "It shouldn't be an invisibility ability. If it was an invisibility ability, there should be feedback when my demonic voice touches it." Zhouwen saw Fei Luo and company crawl out of the ground. Although they looked pathetic, there wasn't much of a problem. He knew that Grim Demon had deliberately controlled the lethality of the demonic voice. Otherwise, ordinary people like them would have died long ago. It's not an invisibility ability, but I can't see it. What ability is this? Zhouwen wasn't actually asking Grim Demon, but thinking. When Ice Maiden heard that, she said, "According to what I know, there are several possibilities. Creatures like mirage demons, nightmare demons, and spirit ghosts can achieve this effect. However, these creatures aren't aggressive. They focus more on mental attack. The strike that destroyed the forest was a strength-type attack. I can't think of any creature that can have these 2 abilities." Zhouwen didn't expect it to be an ability, but he had his own methods. He summoned his army of musical note sprites. Tens of thousands of musical notes sprites flew in all directions, covering all the nearby. No matter what kind of creature it was, they had to pass through the musical of the musical of musical. Even if of danger, the of the one, the was, it of one, and a of the dead. However, they had clearly underestimated the terror of the creature. The musical note sprites that produced the music weren't touched, but a member of the guide team suddenly vanished. However, the terrifying panting that seemed to ring in the elder's ears made the elder know that it wasn't that the person had learned to teleport, but that the terrifying creature had taken him away. Zhouwen, Ice Maiden, and Grim Demon had nasty expressions. The person had vanished not far from them, but they had failed to discover the other party's location. Zhouwen suspected that the other party was a microscopic dimensional creature, but even with Great Brahma's microscopic observation ability, he didn't discover any special microorganisms nearby. "We have to leave this place immediately. Let's split up," Ice Maiden suggested. Without even knowing where the enemy was, there was no way they could fight this battle. They could only passively take a beating. Staying behind would only result in death. What's the rush? If a few more people die, we will definitely be able to capture it, Grim Demon said coldly. Such an opponent infuriated him. The dead people he mentioned were naturally the guides. It wasn't just Grim Demon. Zhouwen and Ice Maiden could also tell that the creature didn't attack them first. Instead, it was looking for the weak guides to attack. It also had some reservations and likely wouldn't attack them first. Grim Demon naturally didn't care about the guides' lives. To be a guide in a place like the strange forest, if one was slow-witted, they definitely wouldn't live long. The guides were all smart people. How could they not know that staying behind meant death? Without any hesitation, they ran back the way they came, planning to escape as many as they could. Grim Demon wanted to stop them from escaping, but he was stopped by Zhouwen. "Come back." Zhouwen got demonic neonate to unsummon Grim Demon. At the same time, he got Ice Maiden and Jade Rabbit to return to the Chaos Bead. Yer was also sent into the Chaos Bead. Fei Luo gritted his teeth and charged towards the time cabin. Zhouwen reached out and grabbed at the air, sucking Fei Luo back and throwing him into the chaos bead. Only Zhou Wen and demonic neonate were left. The reason Zhou Wen did this was because he realized that demonic neonate seemed to be able to see the creature. Demonic neonate's eyes kept darting around. There was no longer any panting in the spot she was looking at. "Can you see where that thing is?" Zhou Wen asked demonic neonate. Demonic neonate nodded slightly before shaking her head. "I can only sense its location, but I can't see it." "Left," demonic neonate suddenly said. Zhou Wen immediately understood as he teleported to the right. Boom! A huge hoof print appeared where Zhou Wen had been. The crater was the size of a room. Zhou Wen held the golden battle god spear in his hand and shot above the hoof print, but he didn't hit anything. He couldn't sense the other party's location. "Behind," demonic neonate said again. Zhou Wen teleported again. The spot where he had been standing was attacked again. It was as though a saber-like object had slashed across the sky. The nearby trees were sliced apart like grass. "What the hell is this thing?" Zhou Wen's expression turned nasty. In such an intense battle, he still couldn't sense the other party's existence. However, the other party was clearly a very powerful creature, not a spirit body with weak offensive strength. Thankfully, demonic neonate could sense the other party's location and act as Zhou Wen's eyes. A special battle unfolded in the strange forest. Chapter 1260. With the golden dual spears in hand, Zhou Wen constantly shot at the spot demonic neonate had determined, but none of the bullets hit the target. Not only could he not see his opponent, but he also didn't seem to have a real body. Amidst the constant attacks, Zhou Wen felt like he was fighting the air. However, the other party's attacks had powerful destructive power. If not for demonic neonate helping Zhou Wen determine the location, he would probably have suffered countless heavy blows. The three elemental golden spears were useless, so Zhou Wen put them away and summoned the Emperor Sword and Shura Blade to continue fighting the air. Zhou Wen was originally looking forward to seeing if the Emperor's Sword could play a special role, but unfortunately, he realized that the Emperor's Sword couldn't injure his opponent. As the battle continued, Zhou Wen suddenly felt his hands sink. The Shura Blade's blade seemed to slash across something. Then, Zhou Wen realized that red blood had appeared on the blade. "I hit it?" Zhou Wen was pleasantly surprised. However, when he focused his gaze, he didn't see any traces of his opponent. The blood on the blade quickly vanished as though it had never existed. Zhou Wen immediately began to think about why the Shura blade would suddenly strike. He had slashed at least 1,000 times previously, but he hadn't managed to hit it. Why did it hit this time? Was it a coincidence? Obviously not. Could it be the luck and blessing attributes of Heaven Azura? The first thing Zhou Wen thought of was naturally the most special ability of Heaven Azura. However, after careful thought, he felt that it wasn't that simple. Luck would only produce a certain probability when it was possible to injure the opponent. As for the opponent's body, it was as though it didn't exist. He couldn't even slash it, so naturally, there was no problem of hitting it. If it's not the effect of the luck attribute, could it be the Deva decay? Zhou Wen immediately thought of another possibility. Heaven Azura had the ability to cause major and minor Deva decay. Although Zhou Wen had never felt that these two abilities were of any use under the Shura Blade's state, in this situation, Zhou Wen felt that it was very likely that these two abilities had taken effect, allowing him to injure an enemy that didn't seem to exist. After a while, Zhou Wen slashed again. This time, it took even less time than before. Zhou Wen was increasingly certain that the Deva 5 Blight had played some role. Otherwise, if he were to rely on luck, the chances would be about the same. There wouldn't be too much of a deviation. And now, Zhou Wen clearly felt that it was becoming easier and easier for him to strike his opponent. It was highly likely that the Deva 5 Blight had taken effect on his opponent. As the number of strikes increased, although he still couldn't see the strange creature, he could sense that it was becoming weaker. Finally, when Zhou Wen slashed down again, he heard a tragic cry as a creature collapsed into a pool of blood on the ground. Half its head had been chopped off. Zhou carefully sized it up and realized that the creature wasn't as big as he imagined. It was only about 2 meters tall. Its lower body was that of a horse, while its upper body was that of a human. Its arms were blades, and its entire body was made of metal. And in its body there were many mechanical gears and parts. It looked strange and mysterious, giving off the feeling of a mechanical creature. He slashed at the creature's corpse, but the metal body couldn't withstand the sharpness of the Azura blade. All sorts of mechanical parts fell out, and soon, Zhou discovered a dimensional crystal. It was a strange metal crystal. It was shaped like a metal pocket watch with a spinning needle. Zhou shone his finger at it and immediately saw its information. Space-Time Bandit Dimensional Crystal. Terror Grade Requirements. Time Elemental Terror Transformation, Space Elemental Terror Transformation, Constitution 81, Essence Energy 81, Strength 81, Speed 81. So this fellow's name is Space-Time Bandit. It's a dual elemental terror grade. I wonder what kind of skill this skill crystal is. Could it be an ability that people can't sense or see? Unfortunately, I don't have the Time Elemental Terror Transformation power. Wait. It might not be impossible. If I can use the Demon God Body and the Godfiend Era at the same time, I can use the Demon God Body to become a Time Elemental creature. Coupled with the spatial powers of the Godfiend Era, will I be able to meet the requirements? Zhou looked at the Space-Time Bandit's corpse on the ground. The Demon God Body could only imitate living creatures. There was definitely nothing he could do about a dead one. When I enter the time cabin later, I'll definitely encounter a time elemental creature. I'll give it a try when the time comes. Without sensing any other danger, Zhou released Ice Maiden and company. However, Zhou didn't release Fei Luo to prevent her from rashly entering the time cabin to find Lucas. Zhou also wanted to save Lucas, but if he entered without confidence, not only would he be in danger, but he would also waste more time. Planning before taking action was Zhou Wen's style. Zhou believed that this wasn't because he was afraid of death. Do you know what this is? Zhou pointed at the Space-Time Bandit on the ground and asked Ice Maiden and Grim Demon. I don't know. I've never seen such a creature before, nor have I heard of it. Ice Maiden and Grim Demon said that they had never seen it before. They had never even heard of the Space-Time Bandit's name. Zhou saw that the Space-Time Bandit seemed very special. Furthermore, his corpse didn't disappear like ordinary creatures. It was as though his body had already undergone a terror transformation. All the parts were terror items. This was very similar to the Ice Dragon King. Such a terror creature was rare among terror creatures. It was rather special. He summoned all the companion beasts he valued, and let them see if anyone was interested in these terror items. Demonic Neonate clearly wasn't interested in the pile of metal parts and fragments. However, among the evolved companion beasts, Truth Listener and Banana Fairy didn't have any reaction. To Zhou Wen's surprise, Explosive Fiend Man was actually interested in the metal parts that had undergone a terror transformation. He walked to a part and picked it up. He gestured at it as though he wanted to install it on himself. However, after gesturing for a long time, he failed to install it. Upon seeing this, Zhou sent the pile of parts and Explosive Fiend Man into the Chaos Bead. He let him slowly mess around. Who knew, he might be able to create something. After some time, the Time Cabin dungeon had long been downloaded. However, the name of the Time Cabin in-game wasn't Time Cabin, but Sweet Log Cabin. Zhou wasn't in the mood to care what it was called. After unsummoning Ice Maiden and Grim Demon, he immediately activated the dungeon and entered the game. The blood-colored avatar entered the log cabin and came inside. The scene he saw was similar to the information he had found online. Inside the tiny log cabin, there was a wooden table, wooden chairs, wooden bed, and a wooden horse. It looked like a child's cabin. Chapter 1261. The moment he entered the wooden hut, Zhou felt a strange force descend on him. The blood-colored avatar's body was rapidly aging. As the time flow in the time cabin wasn't fixed, Zhou realized that the time flow in the cabin he entered was rather fast. His body aged very quickly. Without any hesitation, he rushed towards a wooden door on the back wall of the wooden hut. From the outside, the time cabin looked like a wooden hut, but in fact there were many rooms inside. After passing through the wooden door, there was a corridor behind it. Behind the corridor was a row of 4 wooden hut doors. The last door might contain the space-time pig. In reality, the space-time pig would occasionally appear, but it wasn't always there. Zhou needed to test if it appeared in-game every time. After rushing through the wooden door, he saw a corridor. However, the time flow inside was even faster than in the wooden hut. Zhou switched to the highest heaven opening scripture, but it failed to stop his blood-colored avatar from aging. Before he reached the last wooden door, the blood-colored avatar died of old age. It seems like I can't use teleportation in the time cabin. It's not a rule restriction, but space-time is chaotic. I wonder where I will be teleported to if I use the spatial teleportation skill. Zhou dripped his blood again and entered the time cabin dungeon. Thankfully, the time cabin dungeon didn't have a 24-hour time limit. Zhou couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. After entering again, the time flow in the wooden hut was much slower, giving Zhou sufficient time to enter the corridor. The time flow in the corridor wasn't very fast either. Zhou wasn't happy because of this. If he had only wanted to grind the space-time pig skill, he could have returned by now. But now, he wanted to save Lucas in real life. The time flow in the time cabin was so irregular. He could still try his luck in-game, but was he going to try his luck in real life? If he was unlucky and the time flow was too fast, he would probably die inside. There were 4 wooden doors in the corridor. There was a wind chime hanging on each wooden door. There were 2 words written on each wind chime. Past, future, present, chaos. Seeing that the words were the same as the ones on the internet, Zhou didn't hesitate and pushed open the last wooden door with chaos written on it. The space inside the wooden door was chaotic. Even if the door was open, one couldn't see what was inside. Even Truth Listener and Brahma's powers were unable to peek inside. Zhou had no choice but to walk in himself. It wasn't that he didn't want to use his companion beasts to explore, but in a place like the time cabin, behind every wooden door was equivalent to an independent spacetime. If he sent his companion beasts in, they would lose contact with him. He didn't know what would happen inside, so he couldn't scout the way. After stepping into the Chaos Hut, Zhou saw another wooden hut. The wooden table, wooden chairs, wooden table, and wooden horse were identical to the previous hut. No, there was a small pig carved out of wood lying in the house. It was not big, only the size of a piglet. It looked chubby and very cute. Space-time piglet. Before Zhou could rejoice, his body suddenly aged to death, and the game screen went black. The time flow in the Chaos Hut is just too fast. In just a few seconds, at least 1 to 200 years have passed. If I were to go in the real world, I wouldn't even have a chance of escaping if I were unlucky and entered a room with an extremely fast time flow. Zhou expression turned increasingly heavy. He knew that he had to think of a way to turn luck into something he could control. Otherwise, entering would be equivalent to using his life to buy a lottery ticket. However, even the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder can't stop the changes in the flow of time. I'm not good at time elemental powers, so how can I avoid being affected by the flow of time? Zhou didn't think of a good solution. He entered the time cabin again, but this time, his luck wasn't good. He felt the blood-colored avatar rapidly age the moment he entered the door. By the time he pushed open the door and entered the corridor, the blood-colored avatar was already on the brink of death. Zhou frowned slightly and summoned the Chaos Egg. An eggshell-like sphere enveloped the blood-colored avatar. The Chaos Egg was at the mythical stage, and it was a pure defensive ability. Even if it was effective, Zhou couldn't move inside the Chaos Egg. Using it was useless. Therefore, Zhou originally didn't plan on using it, but after trying all sorts of powers, he realized that it was difficult to stop the changes in time. All he could do was give it a try. This attempt really worked. Inside the Chaos Egg, the blood-colored avatar didn't continue aging. It was only a mythical Chaos Egg, but it completely blocked the flow of time outside. It really works, but after using the Chaos Egg I can't move. I can only stay inside. It's useless even if I'm not affected. Zhou thought for a moment and felt that this was an opportunity. He planned on attempting to advance the First Order of Chaos to the Terror grade. Perhaps when the time came, he would only be able to hide in the Chaos Egg passively. This was rather difficult. In the 100 years he had been trapped, the First Order of Chaos was the essence energy art that Zhou had spent the least time thinking about. Otherwise, he wouldn't have not transformed into his terror form. The difficulty of the First Order of Chaos was in no way inferior to the Tao Sutra. Furthermore, there was something about it that pissed him off. This primordial energy art didn't have any offensive capabilities. The concept of the primordial energy art itself determined that it was an extremely passive power. Although Zhou wasn't a very proactive person, he couldn't stand such extremely passive thoughts. From a portion of the concept that Zhou had comprehended, if he were to compare the First Order of Chaos to a person, he would be the kind of person who wouldn't be angry if the left side of his face was slapped by others. Instead, he would smile and offer the right side of his face for others to slap. This concept didn't suit Zhou's personality, so even if he wanted to learn it, his comprehension was very slow. He didn't even want to practice it. I still have to pass this hurdle after all. Zhou felt that this was an opportunity. Since he had to practice it sooner or later, he might as well take this opportunity to see if he could transform it into his terror form. The time cabin's time flow characteristics were beneficial to his comprehension of the First Order of Chaos. As time flowed at high speeds, Zhou constantly engraved and comprehended the First Order of Chaos, but his gains weren't as great as he imagined. This essence energy art was indeed not suitable for him. If it wasn't for the Lost Immortal Sutra, Zhou probably wouldn't have even been able to gain basic mastery. Without any progress, Zhou could only retreat from the Chaos Egg. After being killed by the time cabin, he dripped his blood again and entered the game. He planned on grinding the Spacetime Piglet's skill first, or he could explore the 4 rooms and see if he could use the demon god body to transform into a time elemental dimensional creature. Then, he could learn the Spatial Bandit skill crystal. If it was a time elemental skill, he might be able to freely enter and exit the time cabin without needing the Chaos Egg to advance to its terror form. After 3 or 4 attempts, he finally entered the Chaos Cabin alive. Indeed, the Spacetime Piglet was lying inside. Chapter 1262. This time, the time flow in the Chaos Hut wasn't too fast. At the very least, it wouldn't kill the blood-colored avatar immediately. As he didn't know how fast the time flow was, Zhou didn't dare waste any time. He held the golden dual spears and fired randomly at the Spacetime Piglet. The Spacetime Piglet immediately reacted as it stared at the blood-colored avatar with widened eyes. A strange thing happened. The golden bullet seemed to have been cast with slow-motion magic. It became extremely slow, as though it could be easily plucked from the golden bullet. What a powerful spatial skill! Is this the legendary spatial stretch? Zhou was somewhat pleasantly surprised. The Spatial Piglet was only at the mythical stage, but it had a certain influence on Terror-grade bullet. This meant that this skill was indeed very powerful. Unfortunately, the mythical stage was the mythical stage. Even though it could slow down the bullets, it still couldn't see where the bullets were. Soon, it was blasted apart by Zhou's random shot. What depressed Zhou was that the first time he killed the Spacetime Piglet, only a crystal that increased his essence energy drop. There was nothing else after that. Thankfully, the Time Hut dungeon could be grinded without limit. If one time wasn't enough, he could do it a few more times. The only thing he wasn't sure about was how long it would take for the space-time piglet to respawn. Not wishing to waste this dungeon, Zhou turned around and left the Chaos Hut. He looked at the remaining 3 huts and hesitated over which hut to enter. Although the Chaos Hut's mortality rate was very high, there was still a chance of survival. As for the people who entered the other 3 huts, they basically didn't survive. Occasionally, someone would come out alive. The descriptions of the other 3 huts were different, making it difficult to tell the truth. The path of the future ultimately has to be taken by myself. The present is in my hands. The only thing I can't change is the past. I'll enter the past hut and see what's inside. After Zhou thought it through, he pushed open the wooden door and walked into the past hut. The moment he entered the past hut, Zhou realized that he had appeared in a terrifyingly hot magma. Thankfully, the blood-colored avatar was wearing the Dragon King armor, so this level of magma wasn't enough to injure him. However, in the next second, a behemoth suddenly appeared in the magma. It opened its mouth and tried to devour Zhou. Zhou hurriedly teleported upwards and dodged the behemoth's devouring. Standing in midair, Zhou realized that he was surrounded by magma and volcanoes. He had no idea where he was. And in the magma river below, there was a huge monster with a human's body and a dragon's tail. Its head looked like a human's, but it didn't. It had dragon horns on its head, and its face looked like a human's. It held a black flaming trident in its hand and stood in the magma, staring at him. He was the monster that had wanted to devour the blood-colored avatar. Seeing Zhou appear in midair, the monster raised the flaming trident in his hand, and the entire world immediately turned into a sea of fire. Crimson flames rose up like a tsunami that blanketed the sky. Zhou used the golden dual spears to shoot at the monster as he quickly retreated to dodge the monster's attack. However, the speed of the flames was even more terrifying than Zhou imagined. Instantly, they drowned the entire world. Even though the blood-colored avatar had used teleportation, the screen still turned black when he came out. The game ended with death. The battle had been too intense. Only then did Zhou see the game's warning box. It kept warning him of danger. 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 That thing is definitely at the calamity grade. Furthermore, why does its appearance look a little familiar? I think I've seen it somewhere before. Zhou was certain that he had never seen such a powerful dimensional creature before, otherwise he wouldn't have forgotten it. This sense of familiarity was most likely because he had seen something similar somewhere. Therefore, Zhou carefully recalled and finally recalled where he had seen such a creature. It wasn't a creature from real life, but something Zhou had found out about Fire God Platform back when he was researching the information on Fire God Platform. There was actually more than one fire god in Eastern mythology. There were many fire gods of different legends. The terrifying creature he had just seen resembled the legendary fire god Zhurong, who had defeated water god Gonggong. Gonggong had knocked down Mount Buzhou, causing the world to collapse. It was obvious how terrifying his strength was. For fire god Zhurong to be able to defeat him meant that his divine might was naturally stronger. The more Zhou thought about it, the more he felt that the monster he had just encountered resembled the mythical fire god Zhurong. This is the West District, and the dungeon is also the West District's dungeon. It's impossible for there to be a mythical figure from the East District, right? It was likely just a resemblance. However, there's actually a calamity-grade creature in the Time Cabin dungeon. This doesn't make sense. How can there be such a powerful creature? Zhou felt that it was too exaggerated. Zhou hadn't seen many dungeons with calamity-grade creatures up to now. Even the Venus dungeon, which was an elite dungeon on a planet, only had one calamity-grade creature. It didn't seem right that there was a calamity-grade creature in this tiny time cabin. Dripping his blood to revive, Zhou entered the time cabin dungeon again. This time, his luck wasn't bad. He rushed into the chaos cabin in one go, but he didn't see the space-time piglet. From the looks of it, it didn't respawn that quickly. Typical mythical creatures only respawned once every 24 hours. Zhou thought for a moment and went to the future cabin. Zhou had already made sufficient preparations, but after entering the future cabin, he was somewhat dumbfounded. Before he could see anything, his phone screen went black. Why am I dead? Zhou frowned inwardly, but he quickly realized that something was amiss. He wasn't dead. The blood-colored avatar's senses were still there, but it was absolute darkness around him. He couldn't see or sense anything. It looked like the phone screen was completely black, as though he was dead. Zhou used the power of Human Emperor to illuminate his surroundings, but just as his body glowed, the phone screen went black again. This time, he really died, and Zhou didn't know what had happened. What is this all about? Zhou originally thought that dying in the past cabin was depressing enough, but he never expected the future cabin to be even more unacceptable. He had no idea how he died. Gritting his teeth, he entered the dungeon again. This time, Zhou's luck wasn't as good. He dripped his blood 5 times in a row before finally arriving in front of the cabin. Zhou had already seen the past and future cabins. He only hadn't seen the present cabin, so he could enter to see what was inside. Pushing open the door and walking into the present cabin, Zhou was already on high alert, prepared to withstand a terrifying attack, but nothing happened. The scene in front of him was still the wooden cabin. The wooden table, wooden chairs, wooden bed, and wooden horse were identical to what Zhou had seen when he first entered the time cabin. There was no space-time piglet, no terrifying creature in the past cabin, nor was there the strange darkness of the future cabin. Even the flow of time was normal, and the blood-colored avatar showed no signs of aging. Chapter 1263. Strange. From the information on the internet, it seems like no one has been able to leave this hut alive. This should be the most terrifying of the 4 huts, but it looks like there's nothing here. There's no danger at all. Zhou circled the wooden hut a few times and didn't discover any danger. He didn't find anything. After waiting for a while, there was still nothing. Zhou had no choice but to walk out of his hut. However, the moment he walked out, the phone screen turned black, indicating that the blood-colored avatar was dead. Could it be that the hut is a hut that can't be walked out? I'll die if I walk out? Zhou immediately realized what had happened. Zhou's heart was heavy. It wasn't because he had died so many times, but on careful thought, the chances of Lucas still being alive were very low. Lucas was only at the epic stage when he entered. Even if he was lucky, it was almost impossible for him to survive after entering the past and future huts when he reached the 4 huts. Now, the house was even more dangerous. If he went out, he would die. If he stayed in the house, the chances of him surviving would be very low. The only way to survive was probably to enter the Chaos Hut. However, if he encountered the space-time piglet, he would still die. After all, it was difficult for an epic creature to defeat a mythical creature. After some thought, Zhou felt that the chances of Lucas surviving were too low. Lucas, oh Lucas, why did you come to such a place if you have nothing better to do? Isn't it better to get married and have children at home? Although Zhou said that, he could understand that it was difficult for a person like Lucas to live a peaceful life. Among the 4 huts, Zhou was most interested in the future hut. He wanted to figure out what was going on with the darkness. As for the hut, Zhou's current strength wasn't enough to fight a calamity grade, so it was useless even if he entered. It was also useless to enter the cabin now. There were no dimensional creatures inside, and anyone who came out would die. It was worthless. After entering the game again, Zhou entered the future cabin. The scene he saw was still dark, but this time, he didn't immediately illuminate his surroundings. Instead, he wanted to use his perception to sense what was around him. The result was the same. Before he could sense anything, the game screen turned black. Strange, he didn't seem to be attacked. How did he die? Nomological powers? Zhou entered again and activated the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. In the darkness, the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder immediately burned like a torch, instantly turning to ashes. At the same time, Zhou was killed. What's going on? Zhou was alarmed. Without a doubt, the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder had taken effect, proving that the power in the darkness was indeed some kind of nomological power. However, it had instantly reduced the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder to ashes. The strength of the nomological power was unimaginable. I entered again. This time, Zhou used the dual powers of the Chaos Egg and the Chaos Creation. Something that surprised Zhou happened. Although the Chaos Egg was suppressed by some strange force in the darkness, it wasn't as intense as the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. It didn't immediately turn to dust. After lasting for more than 10 minutes, the Chaos Egg cracked open and was corroded by the darkness. That Zhou I Zhou to like to that he to say to like he. Like to Zhou. Like, after experiencing countless deaths, Zhou gradually understood something. The heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder was an active power. It wanted to control the nomological power, so when it entered the future cottage, it would directly resist the nomological power. Either you die or I die. There was no other way. Therefore, the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, which was at a disadvantage, was instantly wiped out. However, the Chaos Egg was different. It didn't resist any nomological powers and only passively endured them. It was self-sufficient and created its own small world. Therefore, its existence didn't trigger the intense targeting of the rule power. Furthermore, the influence of the rule power on it was actually very small. However, because the rule power was too powerful, even a little bit of it was difficult for the Chaos Egg to withstand. In the end, it was destroyed. However, as the Chaos Egg was destroyed again and again, Zhou surprisingly realized that it was growing. The first order of chaos is really strange. Can't it practice properly? Must it only improve by getting beaten up? This discovery surprised and delighted Zhou. He was originally vexed over how to advance the Chaos Egg, but he never expected to have an idea. Zhou entered the future cottage again and again, destroying the Chaos Egg again and again. At the same time, Zhou sensed the changes in the Chaos Egg. This first order of chaos seems to make sense. Although it's wrong not to retaliate, not retaliating has its benefit. Zhou gradually discovered the profundity of the first order of chaos. Previously, Zhou had used the phrase, not retaliating, to describe the first order of chaos, but as his understanding of it deepened, he realized that the metaphor wasn't appropriate. To humans, being beaten was a loss. However, to a world, collision represented the transmission of energy. The birth of any life was inseparable from energy. Instead of saying that it was being beaten, it was better to say that the Chaos Egg was absorbing the energy transmitted to it from the outside world. Regardless of whether the energy was gentle or violent, the Chaos Egg didn't reject it as long as it was energy. Using the energy of the outside world to build its own small world, it was better to say that it was a miser than a Mr. Nice Guy who didn't retaliate. It was a classic example of only entering and not exiting. After any energy was accepted by it, it could forget about escaping. The Chaos Egg was an energy container that only entered and not exited. As his understanding deepened, the Chaos Egg gradually changed. In the past, Zhou didn't like such essence energy arts and failed to comprehend its true meaning. Now, Zhou finally understood it, and the first order of chaos advanced by leaps and bounds in a short period of time. Zhou engraved the Chaos Egg on the Wheel of Destiny again and again. The Chaos Egg's appearance didn't change, but its interior had undergone a tremendous change. Perhaps Da Vinci hadn't drawn an egg back then, but the concept of drawing an egg wasn't wrong. Many times, one would discover different truths when looking at the same thing from different angles. Something that looked like a loss might have already obtained tremendous benefits on another level. The moment Zhou Wen realized that it was a blessing to suffer a loss, the Chaos Egg underwent a qualitative change and finally advanced to the Terror grade. Zhou Wen watched as the Chaos Egg advanced, but its appearance didn't change. It was still a ball. Chapter 1264. Terraform, Chaos Egg S-grade. Even the name didn't change. It didn't look like it had changed much, but Zhou Wen knew very well that the current Chaos Egg was completely different from before. If the Chaos Egg in the past was only a sturdy shell, the current Chaos Egg was a huge energy absorption converter. Any power that acted on the Chaos Egg would be absorbed and converted by it. According to Zhou Wen's understanding, the Chaos Egg was divided into 3 levels. When the absorbed power was small, it would be directly converted into essence energy and stored inside the Chaos Egg. If the power that acted on the Chaos Egg was too strong, the energy converted by the Chaos Egg would further condense and turn into liquid essence energy. If the power was greater, the converted essence energy would be further condensed and directly turn into a solid. If the entire Chaos Egg was filled with solid essence energy, Zhou Wen didn't know what the consequences would be. He guessed that it might explode. Zhou Wen hadn't tried it because the nomological energy in the future cabin wasn't enough to fill the Chaos Egg with solid essence energy. It had only just reached the liquid state. Furthermore, it would take a few minutes to produce a drop of liquid essence energy. And the entire Chaos Egg's liquid essence energy could be condensed into a solid essence energy grain. Although the Chaos Egg still didn't have much offensive strength, there was no way to attack the creatures outside. However, the Chaos Egg in its terror form finally had the ability to move and spy on the outside. It was no longer a pure target. At the very least, it could run now. A sphere constantly moved in the darkness, but no matter where it moved, he could sense nothingness. He couldn't sense anything. What is this place? Zhou Wen searched the future cabin for a long time, but he didn't find anything. It left him depressed. After entering the future cabin, there was no door to return. It was impossible even if he wanted to. All Zhou Wen could do was get the blood-colored avatar to leave the Chaos Egg before dying. It's really strange. If it's a maze, there should be a path, but the darkness is endless. There's nothing. What's the point of existence? Zhou Wen thought for a while but couldn't figure it out. After entering the time cabin dungeon again, Zhou Wen used the Chaos Egg to protect himself. After entering, not only did the time flow not affect Zhou Wen, who was inside the Chaos Egg, but it also produced essence energy, filling the Chaos Egg with essence energy. Zhou Wen suspected that even if his primordial energy stat didn't reach 81 points, cultivating in such dense primordial energy would automatically allow him to break through to 81 points. With the Chaos Egg, Zhou Wen had the capital to preserve his life in the time cabin. Even if the time flow became very fast, it didn't affect Zhou Wen. As long as he didn't enter the future, present, and past cabins, the time cabin wasn't too difficult for him. It hadn't even been 24 hours, and the space-time piglet hadn't respawned. Zhou Wen entered the hut again and attempted to use the Chaos Egg to protect himself to see if he could leave the hut. This time, the blood-colored avatar successfully walked out of the hut alive without dying. Although being able to enter and exit the cabin didn't help him grind dimensional creatures, he was still very happy. If Lucas was in the house, he could go in and take a look. Zhou Wen attempted to enter the hut again. He was already prepared to fight the calamity-grade creature, but to his surprise, he didn't see the creature from before after entering. He was deep in the river. Although there was no light here, Zhou Wen could still see his surroundings clearly with his eyesight. He sized up his surroundings and was suddenly alarmed to discover a huge skeleton on the sand at the bottom of the river not far away. The bone marrow looked like that of a mammal. It had a spine and ribs, but it also had bone-like objects that resembled fish fins. The entire skeleton was the size of a frigate. It was unknown what creature it belonged to. It had horns on its head, but there were no bones in its limbs. All the bones were crystalline like jade, emitting a terrifying pressure. Even Zhou Wen felt his heart tremble. It was hard to imagine how terrifying it was when it was alive, given how terrifying it was despite being reduced to bones. Just as Zhou Wen was wondering what creature the skeleton was, he suddenly felt the surrounding river flow in reverse at a terrifying speed. It made Zhou Wen's body involuntarily flow backward with the river. It was as though some terrifying force was attracting the river to flow backward. Even the terrifying monster skeleton was being sucked in as it flowed backward with the river at an unimaginable speed. Zhou Wen hurriedly used teleportation to rush out of the water and appear in midair. Floating in midair, Zhou Wen warily sized up his surroundings. When he saw everything in front of him clearly, his mouth couldn't help but widen. He didn't close it for a long time. A huge river flowed without any end in sight, as though it connected the left and right horizons. It was magnificent and boundless. However, there was a giant who was immersed in the river, constantly drinking water. Every time he drank a mouthful, the water level of the river would drop by dozens of feet. After a few mouthfuls, the tiny tributaries of the river had already dried up. After a few more mouthfuls, the main river had stopped flowing. Just now, Zhou Wen had felt the river flow backward because the giant was drinking water. Under Zhou Wen's dumbfounded gaze, the giant sucked the river dry before puffing out its chest and raising its head as it ran towards the sun. When his foot landed, the ground trembled and the mountains collapsed. The dust and shock waves stirred up were like an atomic bomb explosion. Zhou Wen's body couldn't withstand the shockwaves. Under the Chaos Egg's protection, he was still sent flying. After rolling for a few kilometers, Zhou Wen controlled the Chaos Egg to stop and float in midair. Before Zhou Wen could determine the direction, he suddenly heard a buzzing sound that resembled dragon tendons vibrating. Then, he saw a stream of light flash past and the Chaos Egg was penetrated. The last scene Zhou Wen saw was the Chaos Egg clamping onto an arrow as it flew into the sky like a meteor. Then, the screen turned black again. The cabin of the past. Could it be that I've really returned to the past? Zhou Wen thought of an extremely terrifying possibility. This was because the scene he had seen was just too familiar. The giant and the river that had been drained. All of this was too similar to the mythical stories Zhou Wen had heard his grandfather tell him in the past. Those are only myths and legends after all. Even if the cabin of the past can really return to the past, it shouldn't return to a myth. Unless a myth isn't just a myth. But is that possible? Is there really a mythical era? Zhou Wen's expression kept changing as he felt terrible. If the cabin of the past really returned to the past, what was the dark world of the cabin of the future? Is the future world like that? Zhou Wen found it unbelievable. Chapter 1265. The more Zhou Wen thought about it, the more he shuddered. If Earth were to be reduced to a dark void in the future, what kind of terrifying battle would happen to be able to turn Earth into such a state? It shouldn't be a real scene of the future, right? If the time cabin can really see the future, wouldn't everyone be able to predict the future? Zhou Wen thought about it and felt that it wasn't reliable. Regardless, Zhou Wen could now enter the Chaos Cabin and the present cabin without any danger. He could only enter the future cabin and the past cabin for the time being. Zhou Wen decided to enter the Chaos Cabin and the present cabin to see if he could find Lucas. I hope Lucas is still alive. Zhou Wen walked to the time cabin and pushed open the wooden door to enter. Before walking in, Zhou Wen had already used the Chaos Egg. If he were to use it after entering, he might die before he could use the Chaos Egg if his luck was too bad and he encountered a 1,000-year time flow. The time cabin in reality was the same as in the game. It had a wooden table, wooden chairs, wooden bed, and a wooden horse. It looked like a child's room. Zhou didn't stay for long. The Chaos Egg knocked open the wooden door behind and entered the time corridor. When he arrived at the time corridor, the Chaos Egg immediately formed quite a lot of liquid essence energy. Based on Zhou Wen's experience, under such circumstances, decades would probably pass in a second. If not for the Chaos Egg's protection, he would probably die of old age after taking a few steps. Indeed, I can't rely on luck. Zhou Wen controlled the Chaos Egg to float towards the Chaos Cabin. As no one had been here for a long time, Zhou Wen entered the Chaos Cabin. Not only was there a spacetime piglet, but there was also a rag doll. The rag doll was wearing a beautiful princess costume and had long blonde hair. She looked very beautiful. Zhou Wen had never seen the rag doll before, nor had he seen any information about her on the internet. He didn't dare rashly come out of the Chaos Egg. When the spacetime piglet and the rag doll saw a huge ball crash into the cabin, they immediately moved. The light in the spacetime piglet's eyes shot out like a spotlight, shining on the Chaos Egg. The essence energy in the Chaos Egg immediately increased significantly, condensing into a drop of liquid essence energy. After all, it was only at the mythical stage. Even if it attacked with all its might, it wouldn't be of much use against the Chaos Egg. The rag doll also launched an attack. She held a wand high above her head, and her body spun a few times in tandem with the wand. The princess dress fluttered as it spun, but that wasn't the main point. As the cloth doll spun, the Chaos Egg produced a large amount of liquid essence energy. In a moment, half of the Chaos Egg was filled with liquid essence energy. Time-type Terra creature? Zhou Wen was delighted. Previously, the Spatial Bandit's skill crystal required the dual Terra transformation of time and space. Zhou Wen was worried that he couldn't find a time elemental Terra creature, so this doll was very likely one. If this were in the past, Zhou Wen would have had to capture the rag doll alive and subdue her completely before using the demon god body to scan her body and take on her appearance. Now that he had the Chaos Egg, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. Although he couldn't use offensive powers inside the Chaos Egg, it didn't prevent him from observing. After engraving the demon god bloodline catalog on the Wheel of Destiny, Zhou Wen's body underwent a strange change. His eyes turned extremely demonic as they suffused a strange glow. Zhou Wen focused his gaze on the rag doll as his body gradually began to change. The rag doll and spacetime piglet constantly attacked the Chaos Egg, but apart from adding some liquid essence energy to the Chaos Egg, it wasn't of much use. Zhou Wen didn't suffer any damage inside the Chaos Egg, nor was his demon god body interrupted. However, becoming a Terra-grade creature required too much data to scan. The demon god's eye kept scanning, and after a while, Zhou Wen's body gradually transformed into a rag doll. Half an hour later, he finally transformed into a rag doll. It's indeed time elemental. Even without reading the information, Zhou Wen knew the background of the rag doll from the data obtained from the scan. He was overjoyed as he engraved the Godfiend era and made the clown mask appear on his face. Now that I have both the time elemental and the space elemental, I hope I can absorb the Spatial Bandit's skill crystal. Zhou Wen took out the Spatial Bandit crystal and attempted to absorb it. This time, the Spatial Bandit crystal was easily absorbed by Zhou Wen. It transformed into an endless stream of energy that injected into Zhou Wen's body. Furthermore, it opened up a new essence energy circulation route in his body. It's done. Zhou Wen felt the information from the skill crystal constantly surge into his brain as the look of pleasant surprise on his face intensified. After the skill crystal was completely absorbed, Zhou Wen eagerly switched on his phone to look at his skills information. Although he had already grasped the information of the Spatial Bandit skill, Zhou Wen still habitually read the text. Space-time bandit, terror slaughter that traverses space-time. The introduction was very simple, but Zhou Wen, who had obtained the information on Spacetime Bandit, knew very well that the simple description represented an extremely terrifying meaning. Spacetime Bandit was an extremely strange spacetime skill. It could delay a person's actions by 0 to 3 seconds. This delay didn't mean that one's actions had slowed down, but that one could complete an action in advance by 0 to 3 seconds, using an attack that had previously been completed to attack the present person. It was a little troublesome to describe it. To put it simply, it was like having an avatar. This avatar was you from 1 or 2 seconds ago. At this moment, you had completed a skill, but the skill would be cast 1 or 2 seconds later. By then, the real you would have long escaped. Only your attack could injure the opponent, but the opponent's attack couldn't touch you because you weren't there at all. In actual practice, the changes were much more complicated than this. There were also more maneuverability, making it difficult for Zhou to fully explain it. However, he knew very well that this was a very useful skill. If he used it well, it could be said to be a godly skill. Spacetime Bandit should have other spacetime skills. Unfortunately, I only encountered one. If I could have a few more skills drop, I might be able to kill without leaving a trace like Spacetime Bandit. Zhou felt regretful. However, even so, Zhou was very satisfied. He attempted to use Spacetime Bandit before using Transcendent Flying Immortal. This Transcendent Flying Immortal didn't immediately take effect as Zhou immediately left his previous spot. In less than a second, Transcendent Flying Immortal's light erupted from all the spots Zhou had been at as he slashed in the direction of the Spacetime Piglet. The Spacetime Piglet used spatial stretching, but unfortunately, it was only at the mythical stage. It failed to escape Transcendent Flying Immortal's strike and was killed on the spot. Chapter 1266. Ding. A dimensional crystal dropped. It was a wooden crystal with the Spacetime Piglet engraved on it. Will the Spacetime Piglet's skill crystal be spatial stretching? Zhou was delighted. However, Zhou had no way of picking up the skill crystal in the Chaos Egg. The Spacetime Thief resolved the problem of Zhou when being unable to attack inside the Chaos Egg. As long as he used the characteristic of delaying his attacks, he didn't need to worry about his attacks hitting the Chaos Egg. Zhou continued attacking the doll. After transforming into the doll, he had a rather good understanding of her various skills. He had a huge advantage in fighting her. Furthermore, with the Chaos Egg's protection, Zhou was already invincible. Using the Spacetime Thief's ability, he constantly delayed his attack. As Zhou wasn't too proficient with it, the delay time was very short in the beginning, rarely exceeding a second. After familiarizing himself with it, there was at most a delay of 2 to 3 seconds. There was no way to delay any further unless he could break through to the Terragrade. However, the longer the delay time, the better it was. The longer the delay time, the higher the requirement for judgment. After all, the other party wasn't dead and could move. The longer the delay time, the harder it was to hit the opponent. Of course, if he could predict the opponent's trajectory, he could attack in advance where the opponent wasn't. When the delay time was up, the opponent would happen to walk there. That would be impressive. Zhou had just begun using this skill, so he couldn't do it to that extent. He only tried his best to reduce the delay time to increase the accuracy of his attack. Finally, the rag doll was cut in half by the Shura blade. There was a clanking sound, and something fell out of the rag doll's broken body. Zhou originally imagined that even if it wasn't a companion egg, it would be a crystal or something. However, on careful look, he was somewhat puzzled when he saw what it was. When it fell out, it was a rather unique box. The box was made of wood with exquisite patterns engraved on it. It was equipped with a small and cute copper lock. On the front of the box were a few words. Sweet candy boxes? Zhou made the Chaos Egg vanish for an instant and sucked the Spacetime Piglet's dimensional crystal and the tiny box back. Then, he activated the Chaos Egg again and recited the words on the box. He found it odd. He reached out to touch the copper lock, but it wasn't locked. It opened with a touch. Zhouwen removed the copper lock and opened the tiny box. Inside the tiny box was a candy. The candy was wrapped in a pink plastic wrapper with the words, "Lemon Candy," printed on it. Zhouwen took out the candy and looked at it carefully. No matter how he looked at it, it was packaged in a factory. The words were printed mechanically, making it look like it was artificially produced and not something a dimensional creature should have. As for the small box, it looked like an artificial product, not a dimensional item at all. Strange. Why would a dimensional creature have these human items? Zhouwen looked at the candy box again and realized that there was a note at the bottom of the box. At a glance, Zhouwen saw a line of crooked words written on the piece of paper. It looked like it was written by a child who had just learned to write. Tian Tian doesn't like lemon sweet. Zhouwen looked at these words and thought to himself, could it be that someone brought these things in and was killed by the rag doll? But that's not right. The name of the time cabin is Tian Tian's cabin. Could it be that Tian Tian is alone and the time cabin is hers? The space-time pig and the rag doll are her toys. Zhouwen felt that his idea was ridiculous. How could a human treat a terror creature as a toy? If Tian Tian isn't alone, what could she be? A dimensional creature? Or a powerful creature born from Earth? However, from her words, she doesn't seem like such a powerful creature. She's clearly a child. Many thoughts flashed through Zhouwen's mind. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that something was amiss. All he could do was put this matter aside. Finding Lucas was more important. He placed the lemon candy back into the candy box and wanted to put them into the chaos bead, but he was surprised to discover that the candy box couldn't be placed into the chaos bead. How can this be? Zhouwen tried a few more times and realized that every time he wanted to put it in, there seemed to be a strange force repelling the candy box, preventing it from entering the chaos bead. Zhouwen's heart stirred as he took out the lemon candy and tried to put it into the chaos bead. This time, it went in immediately. This candy box is actually an interspatial item? Zhouwen was alarmed as he hurriedly took out some things to see if he could put things inside. To Zhouwen's surprise, the items couldn't be placed inside, and the candy box's space didn't increase. Isn't it an interspatial item? Then why can't I put it in the chaos bead? Zhouwen frowned in thought. Suddenly, Zhouwen seemed to think of something as he took out some chocolate candy from the chaos bead. He had bought a lot of them this time, and would occasionally take some out for Yer to eat. Zhouwen attempted to put the chocolate candy into the candy box. In the next second, Zhouwen was at a loss whether to laugh or cry. The large pieces of chocolate were easily placed into the candy box that was much smaller than the chocolate. Zhouwen took out a bunch of candies and tried to put them in. In the end, a large pile of candies was placed into the candy box. Once the candies approached the box, they would automatically shrink. They didn't take up any space in the candy box. Who is so bored to make such an interspatial item that specializes in storing candy? Isn't it too extravagant to spend so much just to store candy? Zhouwen was at a loss for words. It was clearly a rare interspatial item with a sizable capacity, but it could only be used to store candy. It was useless to Zhouwen. Alright, I'll give it to Yer. This thing is rather small. It's not bad to store some candy for Yer. I don't want her to ask me for candy when she wants it. Zhouwen put the candies in and after some thought, took out the lemon candy. Who knew if there would be any problems with the lemon candy? He had to be wary of others, so it was best not to eat it randomly. He didn't immediately give the candy box to Yer. Zhouwen wanted to wait and see. After some time, if there were no problems with the candy in the candy box, it wouldn't be too late to give it to Yer. After packing his things, Zhouwen left the Chaos Hut and walked towards the present hut. Since Lucas wasn't in the Chaos Hut, Zhouwen could only place his last hope on the present hut. If he couldn't find it, there was no need to continue searching. The future hut and the past hut were places of no return. At the very least, Zhouwen had yet to find a way to return. The Chaos Egg knocked open the wooden door and Zhou entered the present hut. Chapter 1267. Now, the hut was the same as in-game. It was a standard time hut with a wooden table, wooden chairs, wooden bed, and wooden horse. It was the same as an ordinary time hut stall. However, in this hut, there was something that wasn't present in-game. There were more than a dozen people in the hut. They were either standing, squatting, or sitting. They were clearly living people with flesh and blood, but for some reason, they were all standing there like puppets, not moving at all. Their eyes were staring in the same direction. Zhou heart palpitated as he didn't dare come out of the Chaos Egg. Even in the Chaos Egg, he didn't feel at ease. He hurriedly put on the Dragon King armor and activated all the skills he could, such as the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. After doing all of this, Zhou sized up the situation in the hut again. The dozen or so people in the hut made the small hut appear crowded. Zhou quickly realized that Lucas was among them, but he stood there motionless like a realistic wax figurine. Just like the others, Lucas stared intently at the only bed in the wooden hut. Zhou didn't dare use his eyes to look at the bed. He used Truth Listener's ability to scan it and realized that the bed in the hut was somewhat different from the one he saw in-game. The wooden bed in-game was an ordinary wooden bed, but this bed actually had a translucent bed curtain that covered the entire bed. And on the bed was a person. Lucas and company were looking at the person on the bed. Zhou listened carefully and realized that the person lying on the bed was likely a beautiful woman. As she lay there, he could still see her graceful figure. Her face was so exquisite that it didn't look human. Human? Zhou was somewhat surprised. Although the woman's beauty didn't look human, Zhou could sense a human aura from her. She was definitely not a dimensional creature. At the very least, she had some human bloodline. Zhou didn't dare go over, nor did he attempt to call Lucas. This was because he didn't know what had happened. If he acted rashly, not only would he not be able to save Lucas, he might even harm him or himself. It was just like saving someone who had been electrocuted. One couldn't directly pull him up. One had to use some insulating tools to save him. Lucas wasn't electrocuted, so he couldn't act recklessly. He had to figure out how to save him and not harm him. The Chaos Egg was normal and did not produce essence energy. This meant that the hut was the same as in-game. It did not have the ability to harm people, nor did it change the flow of time. There was a high chance that the woman was the cause of Lucas and company's current state. As Zhou was observing, someone suddenly moved. Zhou hurriedly looked over and saw a man in his 30s or 40s standing by the bed. He had been standing there motionless, but for some reason, he suddenly moved. His eyes were blood-red, and the whites of his eyes were bloodshot, as if they were about to explode. He continued to stare at the woman on the bed, his body pouncing towards the wooden bed like a beast. However, just as his hand touched the gauze-like bed curtain, his entire body stopped as though he had been electrocuted. He didn't continue charging forward as his body trembled like he was having a cramp. As he continued to tremble, dried powder continuously fell from his body. In just a moment, he had turned from a human with flesh and blood into a skeleton. The skeleton could not be preserved, and in the end it turned into ashes, and then nothing was left. Even his clothes and armor seemed to have experienced the baptism of 10,000 years as they turned to dust and scattered. Zhou was alarmed as he didn't dare look at the woman on the bed. However, with Truth Listener's ability, Zhou realized that the woman lying on the bed had become even more exquisite and rosy. She was even more beautiful and alluring. It's indeed that woman. Zhou's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't tell how the woman had attacked the man. An enemy he couldn't see through was the most terrifying. Zhou only wanted to bring Lucas out. He had no intention of provoking the woman. However, bringing Lucas out was a problem. Ignoring the fact that he couldn't touch Lucas, even if he could, how was he to bring him to the cottage? Without the Chaos Egg's protection, leaving the cottage was a dead end. However, only Zhou could use the Chaos Egg. He couldn't bring Lucas in. I can only put him in the Chaos Bead. Zhou looked around and was somewhat hesitant. He definitely couldn't touch Lucas now. If something happened, there wouldn't even be a chance to salvage the situation. Therefore, Zhou could only turn his attention to the remaining people. He wanted to bring someone into the Chaos Bead and see if he could bring them to the cottage. Previously, Zhou had already tried it in-game. Companion beasts would die if they entered and exited on their own, but they wouldn't die if they entered and exited the Chaos Bead. However, that was only a test of companion beasts after all. It was safer to test it with humans. However, if the experiment failed, it would be equivalent to killing a person. This made Zhou hesitate as though it wasn't appropriate to choose anyone. I'm sorry. Anyway, you will ultimately die if you stand here. I'll make a bet for you. If you win, you can escape and live. I don't need you to thank me. If you lose, blame it on your bad luck. Zhou randomly chose a person and was about to close the Chaos Egg and force him into the Chaos Bead. However, before Zhou could do anything, someone suddenly moved. A young man standing beside the table pounced at the wooden bed with bloodshot eyes, just like the middle-aged man from before. Zhou's heart stirred as he immediately closed the Chaos Egg. He extended his hand at the young man and sucked him over, stuffing him into the Chaos Bead. Zhou activated the Chaos Egg again to protect his body. Just as he was about to leave the cottage, something that made his hair stand on end happened. After the young man was stuffed into the Chaos Bead by Zhou, his body rapidly aged. In the blink of an eye, he went from a young and strong lad to an old man. He struggled with all his might, but his body rapidly dried up and pulverized. In a moment, he turned into ashes that scattered everywhere. How did this happen? Zhou was alarmed and puzzled. He hadn't even left the cottage. He had only placed the person into the Chaos Bead, but he had died just like that. Zhou's heart palpitated as he immediately felt that something was amiss. His first reaction was to power the Chaos Egg to leave the cottage. However, when he turned to look at the wooden door, he saw an extremely beautiful and tall woman standing in front of the wooden door. Her beautiful eyes didn't have any human emotions as she stared at the Chaos Egg. Chapter 1268. Come out, the woman said expressionlessly. Zhou knew that the woman meant for him to leave the Chaos Egg, but how could he be willing to do so? If he didn't leave, he might still be able to withstand a few blows. If he left, he might die. The woman was straightforward. In less than 2 seconds after she said that, she slapped him. Inside the Chaos Egg, even if Zhou had all sorts of flying skills, he couldn't fly with the Chaos Egg. The Chaos Egg didn't move very fast to begin with. Immediately, he felt a terrifying invisible force lash at the Chaos Egg, sending it flying like a ball. Bam! Bam! The Chaos Egg was like a bouncing ball as it quickly bounced back and forth in the wooden hut, knocking the people in the hut to the ground. However, even though the wooden tables and chairs in the hut had been severely hit, they did not move at all or suffer any damage. Inside the Chaos Egg, diamond-like solid essence energy appeared. Each of them was the size of a cat's eye, leaving Zhou alarmed. Previously, the rag doll's attack could only transform into a small amount of liquid essence energy. As for this woman's casual strike, she had actually condensed so much solid essence energy. If she attacked with all her might, the might would leave Zhou horrified. Perhaps the Chaos Egg would really explode from the essence energy. Calamity grade. This woman is definitely at the calamity grade, but is there really a calamity grade among humans? Zhou suspected that she wasn't a real human. Currently, the only human calamity that Zhou knew was Wang Mingyuan. However, strictly speaking, Wang Mingyuan was no longer considered human. He could clearly sense that his body had an inhuman aura. As for the human aura on this woman, Zhou couldn't tell the difference between her and an ordinary human. Wait! Zhou hurriedly shouted when he saw that the woman was about to attack again without saying a word. The woman stared at Zhou indifferently and said, "Come out." Zhou thought for a moment and estimated that his Chaos Egg couldn't withstand a calamity-grade attack. It would at most last a little longer, so it was meaningless. Therefore, he deactivated the Chaos Egg and revealed his true body. However, he was still wearing the Dragon King armor and the clown mask on his face. He couldn't see what he looked like when he came out of the Chaos Egg. Human? The woman sized up Zhou, seemingly surprised. "Aren't you also human?" Zhou probed. The woman ignored him and only stared at his body. She indifferently spat out a word, "Strip." "Strip?" Zhou was momentarily taken aback, but he quickly understood that she wanted him to take off the Dragon King armor. "Why do you want me to take it off?" Zhou definitely wouldn't. "Die or strip." The woman gave him two choices without hesitation. "All right, I." As Zhou spoke, his figure suddenly moved rapidly. He pushed the transcendent flying immortal's stance to its limits, instantly circling around the woman and charging towards the wooden door. The woman didn't chase after him, but Zhou's heart palpitated. He had an ominous feeling as he hurriedly summoned the Chaos Egg to protect himself. Bang! It was as if a heavy hammer had smashed into the Chaos Egg. The Chaos Egg looked like it was about to be flattened. Then, it bounced up and kept bouncing around the room. Inside the Chaos Egg, solid essence energy condensed and fell, filling up about 1/6 of the space. Zhou felt somewhat depressed. After all his calculations, he never expected such a freak to appear in the hut. He originally thought that the hut was safe, but now it seemed like he wouldn't be able to leave alive. His plans couldn't keep up with the changes. With such an attack, the Chaos Egg would probably be filled with solid essence energy in just 7 or 8 more times. This isn't a solution. Many solutions flashed through Zhou's mind, but there weren't many that were effective against Calamity Grade. However, the woman didn't care. She slapped the Chaos Egg into the wall, bounced it back, and slapped it into the wall again. The terrifying force almost flattened the Chaos Egg, but the Chaos Egg resisted the pressure and didn't explode. However, a large amount of solid essence energy appeared inside the Chaos Egg. After a few times, Zhou was almost buried in the solid essence energy. Although the Chaos Egg could hold more than Zhou imagined, it was only half filled after suffering 7 or 8 hits. However, if this continued, it wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being filled. "I'll absorb it. I'll absorb it again." Zhou desperately absorbed the solid essence energy inside. At the same time, he used Spatial Theft Kill to release his skills. Spatial Theft Kill's ability was very strange. He used other skills at the same time, but those skills wouldn't be released immediately. After a delay of 0 to 3 seconds, even though Zhou had already left, there seemed to be an invisible avatar releasing the skill Zhou had just used. Under Zhou's crazy release, sword beams appeared where the Chaos Egg shot towards, shooting at the woman like a rain of swords. Zhou's heart-defying sword technique was also considered a powerful sword technique. 3,000 sword intents gathered in his body, and every sword beam had a different sword intent. Beams of sword light arrived in front of the woman. The woman's eyes narrowed, and those sword lights seemed to be frightened by her gaze. They immediately stopped moving forward, all of them paused in the air. The sword beams naturally couldn't be frightened, but the woman's eyes contained terrifying power that forced the sword beams to stop. The woman's gaze changed as the sword beams that filled the sky shattered, turning into countless specks of light that scattered. Zhou gritted his teeth and rushed out of the Chaos Egg. However, he didn't charge at the woman. Instead, he charged at the people who had fallen to the ground. In order to survive, Zhou couldn't care less. He grabbed the 2 people on the ground and threw them at the woman. The woman didn't kill the person Zhou threw at her with her gaze. With a flick of her gaze, The two of them froze in midair before landing to the side. Zhouwen didn't stop as he constantly grabbed the puppet-like people on the ground and threw them at the woman. The woman didn't harm those people. She only controlled them to land behind her, preventing Zhouwen from grabbing anything. Soon, more than 10 people were thrown by Zhouwen. He could no longer grab anything. He reached out to grab a chair, but the chair seemed to be nailed to the ground. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move it. He wanted to flip the table, but the outcome was the same. He used all his strength, but the table didn't budge. As for the woman's gaze, it had already landed on him. Zhouwen immediately felt his body be controlled by an invisible force, completely immobilized. The woman walked towards Zhouwen step by step as her gaze turned sharper. Under the woman's gaze, cracks appeared on the Dragon King armor on Zhouwen's body. It looked like it was about to shatter. Suddenly, the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder appeared above Zhouwen's head. The pages opened, and some mysterious scriptures shimmered with a profound divine light. Zhouwen, who was originally unable to move, suddenly leaped up and slashed at the woman with the Azura blade. Chapter 1269. The wooden hut was narrow to begin with, and the woman was already very close to Zhouwen. The saber was just too close to the woman. With Zhouwen's saber speed, he only needed an instant to slash the woman. But at such a short distance, Azura's blade stopped. Being stared at by the woman, Azura's blade trembled all over, but it could not move an inch forward. Just like that, it stopped in front of the woman and kept trembling. It was no different from a dead fish struggling on its deathbed. Zhouwen used his other hand to press down on the back of the saber, but the Azura saber still couldn't advance an inch. Bam! The woman's eyes narrowed as Zhouwen was sent flying with his saber, slamming into the wooden bed. Several parts of the Dragon King's armor shattered as Zhouwen couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of hot blood. He felt a piercing pain in his chest. At some point in time, the woman had already walked to the side of the bed and reached out to grab the clown mask on Zhouwen's face. Zhouwen widened his eyes as the figure of Brahma appeared. The fourth face with its back facing the black hole slowly turned. As the face turned, the black hole behind it grew larger as though it wanted to devour everything. Inside, there were countless wraiths screaming and countless hellish creatures roaring as though they wanted to turn the human world into a purgatory. The woman stared at the black hole that resembled the exit to hell, but the corners of her mouth curled slightly as she revealed a look of disdain. She pressed her palm towards the black hole that resembled the exit to hell. Her fingers were smooth and flawless. They were as perfect as the most perfect white jade in the world. However, such a palm contained unparalleled power, as though it could suppress all worlds. The terrifying black hole gradually shrank under the palm. The wraith screams and terrifying roars in the black hole became weaker and weaker until they couldn't be heard anymore. As for the black hole, it was compressed to the point of turning into a crack. Brahma's gigantic body became as tiny as an ant under the suppression. The terrifying palm had already occupied the world, and was about to smash Great Burning Sky and Zhouwen into pieces. But suddenly, Great Burning Sky and Zhouwen vanished instantly. They vanished from the woman's terrifying palm, leaving the woman slightly astonished. It was impossible for such a terrifying spatial ability to break through her suppression. In fact, in this small hut, it was not easy to use the spatial transmission ability. It was very easy to encounter the problem of not being able to enter the spatial channel. However, Zhouwen had vanished just like that. Furthermore, under the woman's palm, another humanoid creature appeared almost at the same time. The woman didn't retract her palm in time, and the terrifying power in her jade-like hand crushed the humanoid creature to dust. Although it was just a glimpse, the woman could clearly see that the humanoid creature she had crushed to death was one of the dozen people who had been standing in the house. Later, Zhouwen threw it over and placed it behind her, near the wooden hut. The woman realized something. When she turned her head, she realized that Zhou had already rushed out of the hut under the protection of the Chaos Egg. The woman's eyes were filled with anger. She had actually let a mere human escape from under her nose, and had even accidentally killed her prey. This was something that her proud pride could not accept. Without any hesitation, the woman dashed out of the house. Although the hut and the time corridor were only separated by a wooden door, the wooden door seemed to be a teleportation door that separated the two worlds. Even if the woman wanted to leave, she would need the same amount of time to pass through the door. When she arrived at the time corridor, she saw Zhou passing through another wooden door and returning to the time cabin. The woman chased after him again, furious. However, the time it took to pass through the wooden door made her unable to use her powerful strength and speed. When she entered the time cabin, she only saw Zhou pass through the wooden door and leave the time cabin. Let's see where you can run to. Even if you go to heaven or hell, you will definitely die today. The woman's figure moved almost unnoticeably. She had already entered the wooden door and rushed out of the time cabin. After Zhou rushed out of the time cabin, he turned his head and saw the woman's face peek out of the door, but her body was still enveloped by the light. Without any hesitation, Zhou used the interstellar teleportation ability of the sky-stealing sun-shifting art and arrived on Venus. When he threw those people at the woman, he had already left coordinates on them. Then, he used Brahma to attract the woman's attention, making her think that he was in a perilous situation. Then, he used the sky-stealing sun-shifting art to swap places with one of them. He originally imagined that the woman wouldn't immediately discover that he wasn't the one who died, but the woman's eyesight and reaction were better than he imagined. She immediately discovered the swap between Zhou and that person and chased after him without giving him any time to react. Zhou teleported to Venus just in case. If the woman could still catch up, he could use the Venus dungeon to block her. After arriving on Venus, Zhou realized that he was near the Rift Valley where he had previously discovered the metal flower. His heart couldn't help but stir as he immediately teleported towards the Rift Valley. It was fine if the woman couldn't catch up, but if she could, he might try to use the metal flower's strength to stall her for a period of time. Just as Zhou teleported out, a tall woman's figure appeared where he was. Like a ghost, she gradually condensed from an incorporeal body. It was none other than the woman who had been chasing after Zhou. Zhou sensed the woman's appearance, but he didn't panic. Although she was a calamity-grade expert with overwhelming strength, Zhou might not be able to kill him. Zhou might not be the strongest in other aspects, but he was an expert among experts when it came to life preservation and escape. The experience of countless deaths in-game was definitely not for idling around. Having experienced countless deaths, Zhou knew very well how to avoid death. After teleporting to the edge of the Rift Valley, Zhou teleported into the valley again without hesitation. However, when he teleported out, the Chaos Egg had already appeared beside him. It fell to the bottom of the valley like a huge ball, where the metal flower was. As the Chaos Egg fell, the solid essence energy in it suddenly increased tremendously. Soon, it filled half of the Chaos Egg, delighting Zhou. The greater the Chaos Egg's reaction, the more terrifying the metal flower was. If it were any other time, Zhou naturally didn't wish to encounter such a terrifying creature, but now, he hoped that the metal flower was as strong as possible. The woman followed closely into the valley. Without the restriction of the teleportation door, her speed was much faster than Zhou's. She instantly arrived beside the Chaos Egg and reached out to grab it. She was faster than Zhou had imagined. The Chaos Egg hadn't reached the bottom of the valley yet. It had only fallen about half the distance. Heavens bless me! Zhou could only pray to the heavens, hoping that the metal flower would react. In theory, when any creature's territory was invaded by an unfamiliar creature, they would first pay attention to the creatures that could threaten them. As for the Chaos Egg itself, the threat it posed was extremely low. If the metal flower didn't cower, it might very well treat the woman as its first target. Chapter 1270. The woman's fingers were slender, but compared to the chaos egg, they were still much smaller. However, when her fingers grabbed the chaos egg, it was as though an invisible force extended out and held the chaos egg within. Under the pressure of the invisible finger force, the chaos egg turned into petals and was about to explode. Is the metal flower not reacting? Zhou was somewhat depressed. He was about to be buried alive by the solid essence energy that was constantly being produced in the chaos egg. Just as Zhou was wondering if he should use the second, third, or fourth set of backup plans to escape, he suddenly felt the pressure on the chaos egg decrease significantly. Buzz. A strange buzzing sound entered Zhou's ears. The woman who was grabbing the chaos egg seemed to have lost a lot of strength in her fingers. She looked at the bottom of the valley and saw a metal flower there. The buzzing sound seemed to come from there. The woman stared at the bottom of the valley as her clothes trembled slightly like ripples in water. Zhou felt the surface of the chaos egg tremble as well, but the trembling force didn't enter the chaos egg. Instead, many solid essence energy particles appeared in the chaos egg. The metal flower has a reaction? Zhou was delighted, but he quickly lost his joy. This was because the essence energy in the chaos egg was almost full. Zhou's entire body had been buried in the solid essence energy. As the solid essence energy couldn't be further compressed, the chaos egg began to expand after it was filled. Zhou was in a massive amount of pure essence energy, but he didn't feel the joy of obtaining essence energy at all. The woman seemed to want to rush out of the Rift Valley, but for some reason, she failed to leave the Rift Valley after retreating a distance. It was as though an invisible force was suppressing her body, preventing her from rushing out of the Rift Valley. I've fought countless eras and killed countless terrifying experts over the years. Now, a mere flower actually dares to provoke me. The woman seemed to be truly enraged. Her clothes fluttered as she transformed into pillars of light that descended from the sky and struck the Rift Valley. At this moment, the woman was simply like the reincarnation of the Holy Mother, purifying all evil in the world. The pillars of light were world-shocking, as if they were going to flatten the entire Rift Valley. The terrifying beam of light shot towards the bottom of the valley, but there was no rumbling sound. Before the beam of light even got close to the metal flower, it suddenly disintegrated and shattered into specks of light. Zhou saw some clues. There was a strange vibrating force in the Rift Valley. Anything that entered the Rift Valley would be affected by the vibrating force. It would quickly disintegrate into tiny particles that scattered to the bottom of the valley. What kind of power is this? This was the first time Zhou had seen such power. Although he was curious, he didn't have the time to be curious. As it was simultaneously affected by the woman's finger force and the vibrations of the metal flower, the chaos egg had already expanded to the size of a hot air balloon. It was filled with solid essence energy that nearly flattened Zhou. Although Zhou was already desperately absorbing primordial energy, the bit of primordial energy he absorbed was a drop in the bucket. It didn't affect the overall situation at all. From the looks of it, I can only use the second plan. Zhou knew that he was in the intersection of two calamity-grade calamity domains. He could only survive by relying on the chaos egg. If the chaos egg exploded, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to teleport out. The chaos egg grew larger and larger until it was almost transparent. Zhou didn't dare wait any longer. He put on his armor and various equipment and used space-time theft while using sky-stealing sun-swapping. When Zhou rushed down the Rift Valley, he had deliberately touched the rock outside the Rift Valley and left a mark of sky-stealing sun-swapping. At this moment, he could use it to switch locations, hoping to escape the Rift Valley. However, Zhou was also prepared for failure. In the intersection of the two calamity domains, it was still a question if sky-stealing sun-swapping would work. Zhou first used sky-stealing sun-swapping, but due to the delay effect of time theft, sky-stealing sun-swapping took effect the moment he closed the Chaos Egg. Zhou felt his armor tremble as though it was about to disintegrate. Thankfully, it was only an instant before he vanished from the Rift Valley and returned to the mountain ridge outside. As for the woman's hand, there was an additional Venus rock. The rock couldn't withstand the power of the woman and the metal flower and shattered. I really came out. Zhou was overjoyed. The sky-stealing sun-swapping technique that combined the Godfiend era and the sky-stealing sun-swapping art was even stranger than he had imagined. Even the Calamity domain couldn't stop him. As expected of the name sky-stealing sun-swapping, Zhou didn't dare stay any longer as he quickly teleported towards the Venus dimensional zone. If the woman chased after him again, he would rush into the Venus dimensional zone and use the Calamity creatures inside to deal with this strange woman. However, after teleporting a few times, he discovered that the woman did not follow him. On the other side of the Rift Valley, there were terrifying energy ripples. Beams of holy light bombarded the Rift Valley, and ear-piercing rumbles sounded out from time to time. Large areas of the mountain cracked and mountain peaks collapsed. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. That woman actually didn't rush out to chase after me? Zhou was delighted. He ignored the woman and used sky-stealing sun-swapping again. A small blade of grass from earth appeared where Zhou was, and Zhou returned to the door of the time cabin. This was also a mark he had left behind after rushing out of the time cabin. However, he didn't dare return previously, afraid that the woman would return with him. Now, the woman was fighting the metal flower, so it was unlikely she would catch up so quickly. He summoned the Chaos Egg again. The solid essence energy inside was still filled with it, causing the Chaos Egg to expand greatly. Zhou couldn't care less as he barely controlled the Chaos Egg to enter the time cabin. Soon, Zhou arrived at the cabin, but the scene inside gave him a fright. Most of the dozen or so people from before were in their prime. They looked to be in their 40s or 50s at most, but now most of them had turned into wrinkled old men. They were no longer breathing as they collapsed to the ground. Only 5 people were still alive. 2 of them looked very old. Lucas and the other 2 looked rather normal and weren't that old. What's going on? Zhou's heart stirred as he placed one of the younger people into the chaos bead and attempted to leave the cabin. This time, the young man didn't quickly die of old age. Nothing happened when Zhou brought him out of the cabin. Instead, he woke up. Zhou was delighted. After confirming that he was fine, he rushed back to the cabin without stopping and carried the people and corpses out. This naturally included Lucas. Chapter 1271. Ah, why am I here? Lucas looked at Zhou and Fei Luo in front of him in puzzlement. Zhou saved you. Hurry up and thank him. Fei Luo was filled with joy. She was originally a little angry that Zhou had forcefully imprisoned her. However, she never expected that after Zhou released her, Lucas would appear in front of her. Although he looked a little dazed, he didn't seem to have any major problems. She couldn't help but feel grateful and ashamed. She never expected Zhou to take the risk to enter the time cabin and save Lucas. She had previously suspected that Zhou was afraid of death and didn't dare enter to save Lucas. Zhou, how did you get me out of the cabin? I thought I was dead for sure, Lucas said with lingering fear. Although Zhou wanted to ask what he had experienced in the cabin, now wasn't the time to talk. The terrifying existence in the cabin is chasing us. Everyone, split up and escape. We can talk later, Zhou said as he teleported away. He wasn't sure when the woman would catch up. He had previously scattered the people and corpses in different places. Now that he was separated from Lucas, even if the woman really caught up, she probably wouldn't be in the mood to capture him. The great Lucas will fight alongside you. Zhou vaguely heard Lucas's voice, but he ignored him. Zhou teleported to Venus again, but he wasn't near the Rift Valley. However, He could sense the energy fluctuations coming from the Rift Valley. Despite being so far away, he could still feel the tremors of the ground. Clearly, the battle was still ongoing. What's the origin of that metal flower? It's actually able to fight that terrifying woman to such an extent. It doesn't seem to be at a disadvantage. Zhou sensed the energy fluctuations and realized that the vibrations of the metal flower were still very strong. It wasn't suppressed by the woman. Zhou didn't dare get too close. All he did was sense the essence energy fluctuations from afar and roughly judge the battle situation. As it was too far away, Brahma and Truth Listener's abilities couldn't reach it. Sensing that the energy fluctuations were weakening, Zhou gritted his teeth and headed for the Rift Valley. This woman was so terrifying and wanted to kill him. If he had a chance, Zhou naturally wouldn't let her off. However, Zhou was still no match for her. Now it seemed to be an excellent opportunity. The woman and the metal flower's powers seemed to be fading, so Zhou decided to take the risk. If he allowed the woman to leave safely, she might chase after him again when she recovered. Therefore, Zhou knew that it was a rare opportunity. He had to take a look no matter what. He put on the invisibility cloak and used its invisibility function. Although he did not know if it would be useful against calamity grades, he was at least somewhat comforted. As Zhou constantly approached the Rift Valley, he realized that the energy fluctuations there were still extremely terrifying. Beams of holy light descended, and the Rift Valley had long been blasted beyond recognition. It had turned into a basin instead of a narrow Rift Valley. The power of a calamity grade super is too terrifying. Luckily, this is Venus. If this was Earth, who knows how many people would have died. Zhou endured the energy fluctuations and leaned forward. As the energy fluctuations were too strong, he couldn't see the situation clearly if he was too far away. He had to know what was going on inside to know if he had a chance. The woman's holy light was still all right. The power of the holy light was very condensed, and it basically struck the basin. Only the aftershocks spread out. Zhou was wearing the Dragon King armor, and with the power of Brahma, it wasn't difficult for him to withstand it. However, the metal flower's vibrations were area of effect. They spread over a long distance, and the vibrations were still so strong that Zhou felt uncomfortable. The Dragon King armor was about to shatter. This won't do. If I continue approaching, the armor will disintegrate. Zhou felt the Dragon King armor creak and couldn't hold on any longer. All he could do was stop approaching. He was still dozens of kilometers away from the basin, but he still couldn't sense the situation inside. However, there was nothing he could do. All he could do was wait patiently, hoping that he could get closer when the power weakened. After waiting for more than half an hour, the battle was still abnormally terrifying. He couldn't approach at all. At this moment, the humans on Earth also discovered this terrifying battle. The Magic Cube didn't livestream this battle. It seemed to only be interested in the creatures that had barged into the metal dimensional zone. It ignored the other creatures. The reason why humans were able to discover this battle was thanks to the various factions using spatial teleportation abilities to obtain some artificial satellites near Venus. Originally, those artificial satellites were only used to make it easier to observe the situation in the Venus dimensional zone. They never expected to see such a huge battle. However, by the time they discovered this battle, it was already quite late. The Special Investigation Bureau's artificial satellites first discovered the terrifying holy light there. As the Bureau's director, Wei Gu immediately tried to get the artificial satellites to record the situation. Although he could only capture the holy light and collapsed rocks, it was enough to shock people. Such power was clearly not caused by the internal movements of Venus. There was definitely some creature fighting, but they just couldn't see it. After the news spread, many factions quickly used the artificial satellites to observe. However, the scene they could see was similar to the Bureau's. What terrifying power! It's a calamity-grade battle, right? Blood Shaman said with lingering fear as he looked at the images sent back by the artificial satellite. Cave Era said, both sides of the battle should be at the calamity grade. If we were present, we might be able to see some clues. Although the artificial satellite's filming capabilities are already very powerful, it's probably very difficult to capture the true bodies of calamity-grade creatures. Why are they fighting there and not in the Venus dimensional zone? Could it be that there's something special about that place? The hermit said after some thought. Let's wait and see. Perhaps there will be an answer soon, Immortal said calmly as he looked at the image. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. Although the hermit wanted to propose to send someone to see the battle, he thought that because of his radicalism, the Tower of Babel was destroyed, causing the League of Defender to be in a very passive situation, so he did not dare to ask again at this time. While everyone was paying attention to this battle, Zhou was also waiting. Unfortunately, he didn't find a chance to approach. Just as Zhou was worrying over it, he suddenly felt a consciousness tremble in the chaos bead. It left him slightly taken aback as he probed the chaos bead with his consciousness. He immediately realized that the one who had transmitted the consciousness was the Galaxy Shell Dragon. The moment Zhou opened the chaos bead, the Galaxy Shell Dragon flew back and returned to Zhou's body, transforming into a tattoo again. However, the current Galaxy Shell Dragon was a little different from before. The sphere that it was hugging was nowhere to be seen. Chapter 1272. The original Galaxy Shell Dragon was in the form of a blue crystal that looked very much like an Australian lobster. But now, although it was still a tattoo, it was already very different from before. The color had turned into a translucent jade white. It was crystalline, and there seemed to be clouds flowing inside. It was like a dream, as though it didn't exist in the human world. The shell dragon's appearance had also changed. Although it still looked like a lobster, its head had become more like a dragon's. Its body had clearly become wider, and the carapace on its back had become thicker. Furthermore, it had many edges and corners. It looked like the surface of a diamond, appearing hard and gorgeous. It was resplendent like stars orbiting it. Zhou's eyes revealed a look of delight when he sensed the information transmitted by the Galaxy Shell Dragon. He hurriedly took out his phone to take a closer look. Imprisoned Dragon, Terror Grade, Evolvable, Life Providence, Unbreakable Life Soul, when things reach an extreme, they reverse. Wheel of Destiny, Absolute Defense Terror Form, Imprisoned Dragon Strength, 99 Speed, 99 Constitution, 99 Essence Energy, 99 Talent Skill. Death Cage, Ghost Armor, Dragon Imprisonment Lock, Dragon Imprisonment Rises. Companion Form. Armor. It wasn't surprising that the Galaxy Shell Dragon had advanced to the Terror Grade. After all, the jade bead it had absorbed belonged to a Calamity-grade dragon turtle. It would be strange if it didn't advance to the Terror Grade. What Zhou didn't expect was that Imprisoned Dragon wasn't as simple as advancing to the Terror Grade. Even its species seemed to have changed. Now, Zhou didn't know if Imprisoned Dragon was the advancement of the Galaxy Shell Dragon or if the Jade Ball's power had occupied the Shell Dragon's body, allowing it to continue its life in another form. Regardless of the situation, there were only benefits for Zhou. Imprisoned Dragon's stats were undoubtedly the best among the Terror Grade, especially its defense. Zhou felt that he might even be able to vie for the position of the best defensive companion beast at the Terror Grade. Absolute defense could now be used indefinitely, no longer having the time limit from before. With the augmentation of the Unbreakable Life Providence, its defense was insane. Coupled with the life soul that could reflect all kinds of attacks, it was even more porcupine than a hedgehog. The terror form of dragon imprisonment and the various skills that were different from before still needed to be tested in actual combat. Zhou immediately used the imprisoned dragon armor to replace the Dragon King armor. The black armor was instantly replaced by the crystalline, translucent white armor. Clouds rose inside the armor as endless starlight swirled around it. It looked gorgeous and dazzling, as though a hero had appeared. Isn't this a little too exaggerated? How am I supposed to launch a sneak attack? How am I supposed to hide and escape? Zhou didn't like such gorgeous armor. He preferred the inconspicuous armor like the Dragon King armor. It suited Zhou aesthetics. However, the defense of the dragon armor was clearly much higher than the Dragon King armor. Zhou didn't feel the effects of the vibrations on him while wearing the dragon armor. As expected of absolute defense, Zhou was delighted as he attempted to approach the basin that had been created. As he got closer and closer to the battlefield, the absolute defense of the imprisoned dragon armor came into effect. He forcefully endured the aftershocks of the Calamity Grade's power and advanced. The armor was completely undamaged, and the impact on Zhou body was greatly reduced. Zhou finally sensed the situation on the battlefield. The Rift Valley had already turned into a huge crater that was bigger than a city. The spot where the flower was had turned into a long pillar that was hundreds of meters tall. It was like an unreachable lighthouse. The metal flower looked very small, but its roots were so deep that the bottom could not be seen. The entire giant pillar was filled with its root. They went even deeper into the ground, and no one knew how long they were. Venus had many metal mines, and the metal elements here were especially rich. The ground below was almost like an alloy. It was hard to imagine that such a small flower could take roots so deeply in the metal. The holy light on the woman's body intensified as beams of holy light descended. It could no longer be called holy light, but it was like angels of the holy light had descended. Every angel of the holy light brought with them an unparalleled power of the holy light as they charged at the flower as though they were sacrificing themselves. However, the flower remained motionless. All it did was hum. No matter how terrifying the angels of the holy light were, they failed to reach the flower. The strongest angel automatically disintegrated into particles when it was 2 to 3 meters away from the flower. So powerful! Zhou didn't know the origins of the metal flower, but its ability was just too sick. Anything that approached it would disintegrate. It felt invincible. The flower wasn't human, so it didn't know how to be proud. Otherwise, it would be looking down on the woman with extreme pride. The woman had used all sorts of means, but she had failed to harm the flower at all. This flower? Could it be the legendary withered flower? That's not right. The withered flower can only make life wither and turn to dust, but this metal flower can disintegrate through vibrations. What is this thing? The woman frowned as well. She couldn't tell what the metal flower's abilities were. More importantly, she didn't wish to fight the metal flower, but she couldn't rush out of the metal flower's domain. It had already locked onto her, and once she showed any signs of weakness, she would be doomed. That darn bastard! He better not let me catch him, or I'll tear him to pieces. The woman hated Zhou to the core. If not for him, she wouldn't have encountered such a troublesome metal flower of unknown origins. As she was thinking, the woman suddenly felt someone touch her calamity domain. After careful identification, she realized that a human had entered the battlefield. The woman wasn't sure if it was Zhou. The armor on him was completely different from what Zhou had worn previously. She couldn't tell if the person inside was Zhou. However, on second thought, it didn't matter if it was the human from before. Now that such a person had suddenly barged in and could withstand the invasion of the Calamity Domain, this seemed to be good news for her. A few thoughts flashed through the woman's mind, and she quickly made up her mind. Regardless of whether the human was the one she had been chasing or not, she could make use of him. Zhou didn't dare get too close. He stopped at the edge of the battlefield where he could spy on it. After observing for a short while, he suddenly felt that something was amiss. He saw the woman take out something from her pocket. Before Zhou could see what it was, his body involuntarily flew towards the woman. Zhou flailed his limbs wildly, hoping to stop himself from flying towards the woman or teleporting away. However, none of them worked. Even sky pilfering couldn't bring him back to the previously marked location. Oh no! Zhou immediately felt that something was amiss. He could already see clearly that the woman was holding a yellow talisman. Chapter 1273. The yellow paper talisman looked somewhat similar to the substitute talisman that Zhou had drawn himself. From the patterns, they seemed to come from the same lineage, but the runes were different from the paper. Zhou didn't know what the runes meant, but the power of the runes sucked him towards the woman. He couldn't escape no matter how hard he tried. His body flew faster and faster, and in an instant, he stuck to the runes and was grabbed by the woman. Thankfully, Zhou reacted quickly enough and activated the Chaos Egg in time. The woman only grabbed the Chaos Egg and didn't grab Zhou's body. However, the solid essence energy in the Chaos Egg was already full. If the woman exerted any more strength, there was a high chance that it would explode. The woman didn't pinch it. Instead, she grabbed the Chaos Egg and threw it at the metal flower like a baseball. Zhou wanted to use sky stealing to return to the mark he had left in the distance, but he was shocked to discover that he still couldn't use sky stealing. As for the yellow paper talisman, it was stuck to the Chaos Egg, suppressing his strength. As the Chaos Egg rapidly flew towards the metal flower, the vibrations it endured became stronger and stronger. The solid essence energy inside increased tremendously, and it was about to explode. From the looks of it, I can only use the third plan. Zhou had already considered this problem. It wasn't impossible to quickly expend the essence energy in the Chaos Egg. There was still a way. Without any hesitation, Zhou took out the immortal culling sword and held the hilt. Slaughter fused with him, and used immortal slaying to forcefully pull out the immortal culling sword. With just a slight movement, the immortal culling sword sucked away a massive amount of essence energy. The solid essence energy in the Chaos Egg vanished in large chunks. The essence energy transformed by the Chaos Egg wasn't enough for the immortal culling sword to absorb. The immortal culling sword required an immense amount of essence energy. Even Zhou didn't know how much he needed. The last time he used the immortal culling sword, it was the Sigh of the King that provided most of the energy. His own strength was almost negligible. According to Zhou's calculations, Terragrade essence energy was nothing to the immortal culling sword. Only calamity-grade creatures could provide the essence energy needed by the immortal culling sword. When he came, Zhou had already thought it through. It would be best if he could find an opportunity to kill the woman. If he was caught by her again, he would see if he could use the converted essence energy to pull out the immortal culling sword. Soon, Zhou realized that he had underestimated the amount of essence energy needed by the immortal culling sword. Half of the essence energy that had been accumulated in the Chaos Egg had been sucked away in an instant. Thankfully, the closer the Chaos Egg was to the metal flower, the stronger the vibrations it received. The more essence energy it produced, preventing the essence energy in the Chaos Egg from drying up. Zhou's situation was like he was boiling water. The vibrating force of the metal flower was like fire, and the Chaos Egg was a pot that boiled water. Originally, if the fire was too intense, the pot would melt. However, because there was water in the pot wouldn't spoil before the water was boiled dry. Now, the immortal culling sword was playing the role of water. The pressure the metal flower gave the Chaos Egg transformed into essence energy that was absorbed by the immortal culling sword. Before the immortal culling sword was full, the Chaos Egg wouldn't be damaged. Although the Chaos Egg wasn't damaged, it didn't mean that the Chaos Egg's strength could really resist the metal flower. After the woman used up all her strength, the Chaos Egg was immediately repelled by the vibrations and rushed towards the woman at an even faster speed. The woman originally wanted to use the opportunity of the metal flower being disrupted by the Chaos Egg to escape, but she realized that in this strange domain, her body seemed to resonate with the vibrations. Once she attempted to leave this area, her body's frequency was different from the outside world. She was repelled by the entire universe's frequency. She would be severely injured even if she didn't die. Seeing the chaos egg bounce back again, the woman's palm erupted with holy light as she struck the chaos egg and smashed it back. The solid essence energy in the chaos egg was about to run out, but the immortal culling sword hadn't been pulled out. It was still crazily absorbing his essence energy. It turned out that Zhou was grumbling inwardly. He never expected that the essence energy transformed from calamity-grade power wasn't enough. After pulling out the immortal culling sword, he probably had to think of a way to stimulate the power of the Sai of the King. However, to his surprise, the woman's power struck the chaos egg heavily, immediately transforming it into a large amount of solid essence energy. It could last a while longer. After being struck by the power, the chaos egg flew towards the metal flower like a comet. During the process, it was affected by the vibrations and also produced a large amount of solid essence energy. The chaos egg was sandwiched between the two calamity-grade existences and was constantly struck by their powers. This allowed Zhou to obtain enough essence energy to barely satisfy the needs of the immortal culling sword. Now, what Zhou was most worried about was that they would suddenly stop fighting or stop hitting his chaos egg. Then, the immortal culling sword would suck him dry. Thankfully, the situation Zhou was worried about didn't happen. The woman didn't seem to believe that she hadn't shattered the strange ball with her powerful strength. She whipped the chaos egg even harder, hoping to blast it apart. He was only a human. At most, he was at the terror grade. The woman refused to believe that her strength couldn't destroy the chaos egg. Even if she couldn't affect the metal flower, she had to kill this despicable human first. Bam! 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 The chaos egg was like a ping-pong ball as it bounced between the woman and the metal flower. The humans who were paying attention to this battle were trying their best to figure out what kind of creatures the two parties were, but the interference was just too strong. Apart from seeing the explosions of light, nothing could be seen from the satellite. Such holy power! Could it be the descent of a saint or the Holy Mother? Someone in the West District guessed. Amidst the terrifying holy light, some terror-grade experts could vaguely see angels formed from holy light. It might also be the descent of a powerful angel. Could it be the legendary Archangel Michael? I don't think so. Do you still remember? Among the dimensional creatures that went to Venus previously, there was a black-winged angel. Perhaps one of the protagonists of the battle is him. That black-winged angel looks like a fallen angel no matter how I look at it. He shouldn't have such holy power, right? Who said that fallen angels can't possess holy power? Didn't the legendary Lucifer possess holy power? As everyone discussed, they suddenly saw holy light erupt like a volcano on the battlefield in the projection. The holy light illuminated the entire battlefield. In the light, one could vaguely see the shadow of a six-winged angel. The shadow's face and form were very similar to the woman's. Chapter 1274. Heavens! That's Salaf, right, Seraph? This world is really going to change drastically. Even Seraph has appeared. Many believers who saw this scene prayed to the six-winged seraph. In the Old Testament, the six-winged seraph represented the leader of the angels, Seraph. Any believer would be proud to see a seraph. Salaf has appeared in this world and displayed its divine form. It's time for our church to save the world again. An archbishop was so excited that tears streamed down his face. In this era, faith had collapsed. All sorts of immortals and saints had been slaughtered. The faith of humans was becoming weaker and weaker, and there were fewer and fewer believers. However, there were still many devout believers who believed that their true God definitely existed. Now that the six-winged seraph's shadow appeared, many devout believers believed that a true angel had descended and that their true God was about to save them. The upper echelons of the various factions had different expressions when they saw the angel's shadow. Some were happy while others were worried. The people of the West District naturally believed that it was a powerful existence that belonged to their district. If it really descended, it might bring good changes to the West District. However, even the two big shots of the Cape family and the family clan of gods weren't happy at all. Their thoughts were completely different from ordinary people. Even if it was a powerful existence in their district, as long as it wasn't in their hands, it was only a threat. Who cared about angels or devils? In this era, they no longer believed in such things. Xia Luchuan happened to be a guest at the Zhang family. When he saw this scene, he asked Zhang Chuanxiu, "Guess, is the creature in battle really the West District's mythical Salaf?" "I don't know. After all, it's not something from our district." "I don't know much about it," Zhang Chuanxiu said. Xia Luchuan curled his lips and continued, "According to what I know, in the West District's Old Testament, seraphs should have 4 or 2 heads. This looks a little too normal. Furthermore, if it's just a shadow, I wonder if it's a real seraph. Perhaps it's just a shadow effect caused by a skill." "It's not a shadow effect. It should be the manifestation of a calamity-grade power." Zhang Chuanxiu paused for a moment before saying, "If such power appears on Earth, it would be a miracle. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that a true god has descended." However, Xia Luchuan said, "Actually, I want to know who her opponent is. Regardless of whether she's a real seraph or not, to be able to fight her to this extent without seeing her strength, her opponent might be stronger." "Maybe." Zhang Chuanxiu wasn't as curious as Xia Luchuan. He only hoped that a battle of this level wouldn't appear on Earth. Otherwise, it would be a calamity for humanity. Originally, only a few people could see this battle, but because the Archbishop was too excited and wanted to spread the news of this miracle, he broadcast the images from the satellite, instantly attracting the attention of many people in the Federation and overseas. F***CK, what is that? Seraphim? Is that Venus? Seraphim fighting on Venus? Who is she fighting with? Why is it outside of Venus? Shouldn't we be heading to the Venus dimensional zone? More and more people watched. As word of mouth spread, many people knew that a seraphim had appeared. Many fanatical believers immediately turned on the internet to watch the livestream. Some even prostrated themselves before the angel's projection. Zhouwen didn't believe that there was anything to worship. He knew better than anyone how vicious that woman was. Ignoring the need to worship her, Zhouwen wished he could kill her with one strike. However, the immortal culling sword hadn't absorbed enough essence energy, so it couldn't be pulled out. To Zhouwen's surprise, the strength that the woman released suddenly increased significantly, causing the solid essence energy in the Chaos Egg to rapidly condense. Instantly, it caught up to the immortal culling sword's absorption speed. This woman is so strong. Zhouwen originally imagined that the woman would have long displayed her strongest combat strength, but he never expected her to truly unleash her strength now. In fact, it wasn't that the woman didn't want to unleash her strength earlier, but that if she used this strength, it would cause her serious consequences. Unless it was absolutely necessary, she didn't want to use this strength. If it were any other time, the woman wouldn't use such strength. Even if she couldn't kill the metal flower wouldn't be able to defeat her. In the end, everyone's strength would be about the same. When the Calamity Domain's strength weakened, she would be able to rush out. What she couldn't tolerate was that she couldn't even deal with a mere human. He was clearly a weak fellow, but she didn't know what the ball he condensed was. She couldn't bear to let Zhouwen off after so many strikes. Even if she had to make some sacrifices, she had to shatter the Chaos Egg and kill the despicable Zhouwen on the spot. Only then could she regain her calm. At that moment, the woman had 6 angel wings spread out on her back. There was also an angel halo above her head. Her entire body spewed out holy light that resembled blazing flames. Holy light filled the entire battlefield, forming the 6-winged angel's shadow. Even the metal flower's vibration domain was suppressed. If the woman wanted to leave the battlefield now, it would be very easy. However, she didn't want to leave just like that. After paying a huge price to obtain strength, anyone would feel terrible if they couldn't vent it. It was the same for women. The woman stared coldly at the chaos egg that had been repelled once again. She clenched her fist, and the blazing holy light condensed into a flame-like sword. The holy light on the flaming sword was thousands of times stronger than the holy light on the woman's body. It slashed down at the chaos egg, and a sword beam that seemed to split the heavens and earth tore through the air. It sliced apart the metal flower's calamity domain and slashed straight at the chaos egg. Joan was alarmed when he saw this. He was somewhat worried that the chaos egg couldn't withstand such terrifying power, but at this point in time, he could only take a risk. Boom! The people watching the livestream saw the six-winged angel's shadow emit a holy light that resembled a sword beam. The holy light split the ground, forming a ravine that was hundreds of kilometers long. It was like a sword of judgment during the apocalypse. As the metal flower's calamity domain had been sliced open, they finally saw the situation inside. The chasm created by the holy light stretched as far as the eye could see. The silhouette of a six-winged angel floated in the air. In the middle of the chasm, there was a tower-like pillar. At the tip of the pillar, there was a small metal flower. Holy sh*T, the creature fighting the seraphim is actually a flower. What's the origin of that flower? It can actually fight the six-winged angel? Unbelievable. Does a plant-type dimensional creature have such powerful combat strength? A plant that can fight a seraphim? Chapter 1275. Even Cave Era and company in the League of Defender were astonished to see that the one fighting seraphim was a metal flower. Plant-type dimensional creatures have always been relatively weak. Even if they have certain abilities, they can only be effective within a certain area. I wonder what the origins of this plant on Venus are to be able to fight the six-winged seraphim? Blood Shaman said. The hermit stared at the flower for a while and said with some emotion, "That flower looks like the legendary withered flower." "What's a withered flower?" Blood Shaman asked in puzzlement. Cave Era looked at the metal flower on the screen and said, "Legend has it that every withered flower represents a life. When that life is about to end, the withered flower will wither. Therefore, the withered flower is actually the flower of life. It can control life and death. However, the withered flower should be a Logia. This metal body doesn't seem right." The hermit thought for a moment and said, "There's indeed something wrong, but it really looks like a withered flower." Immortal, who was sitting in the main seat, finally spoke. When he spoke, everyone fell silent, including people like Blood Shaman and Cave Era. They didn't dare make a sound, afraid that they would disturb him. "That's the legendary withered flower, but it's not a normal withered flower. If I'm not wrong, someone should have brought the withered flower seed from Earth to Venus. The withered flower absorbed the metal elements of Venus to grow and mutated, resulting in such a strange withered flower," Immortal said slowly. "Who has the ability to find the withering flower and bring it to Venus? How could it survive in that kind of environment?" The hermit felt that it was too difficult to find the withering flower. "Who knows, but it's definitely a very interesting person," Immortal said with interest. At that moment, on the battlefield, the metal flower began to show its might. Flower roots extended out from the tower-like pillar. Although the flower was small and could be held with one hand, its roots were unimaginably large. Each root was like a real dragon, breaking through the rocks and burrowing out of the ground, causing the earth to crack and rocks to overturn. The mountain range was shaking non-stop, as if there was a magnitude 12 earthquake. Flower roots extended out, occupying an area of hundreds of kilometers. Some flower roots even wrapped around mountains and uprooted them. Rumble! Rumble! The mountain peak shattered. It was as if an invisible force had shattered all the mountain peaks and rocks into tiny particles. Wherever the flower roots passed, the entire space was shaking violently. It wasn't an earthquake, but the entire space was trembling. Everyone was dumbfounded. They had never seen such a ferocious plant before. It was like an interstellar monster. A random root could shatter a mountain. How terrifying was this power! Now, many people were secretly rejoicing that this battle did not happen on Earth. Otherwise, many humans would definitely be affected. Just as everyone was shocked by the terrifying power of the metallic flower, the woman launched another attack. The blazing sword in her hand slashed down again. However, this time, her target was not the chaos egg but the metal flower. The metal flower also sensed the danger. Its roots were like metal monsters as they swept toward the blazing sword in an attempt to block it. However, when the blazing flame sword slashed at the flower roots, it was like cutting through tofu. The terrifying dragon-like flower roots were all severed. Any flower root that came into contact with the sword of blazing flame was instantly melted, turning into molten iron that fell to the ground. Boom! The stone pillar, which was thousands of meters tall and looked like a giant tower, was split in half by the sword of blazing flame and collapsed to the sides. The leaves beside the metal flower were sliced off. Almost all the roots below were severed and burned. Lord Salaf is invincible. This is a true angel, an omnipotent emissary of God. To be able to slay such a terrifying monster with one strike, she's indeed the strongest seraphim. People exclaimed in amazement as they marveled at the strength of the six-winged seraphim. Many believers even treated the woman as a true seraphim. At that moment, at the end of the chasm, a person walked out of the rubble. He held the hilt of his sword in one hand and the scabbard in the other. His aura was almost non-existent. Just now, the chaos egg had been slashed down by the sword and flew hundreds of kilometers. This chasm was created by the chaos egg. Zhouwen was originally worried that the chaos egg wouldn't be able to withstand such a powerful impact and would be sliced apart. Even he wouldn't be able to escape. In fact, the chaos egg had indeed been sliced apart. Thankfully, the remaining force was blocked by the absolute defense dragon armor. However, before it shattered, the chaos egg had already converted a massive amount of solid essence energy to fill the immortal culling sword's need. Even so, the immortal culling sword didn't immediately stop after it finished absorbing. It only truly stopped after absorbing most of the essence energy in Zhou Wen's body. Just as Slaughterer was about to be sucked dry, Zhou Wen jumped in fright. Thankfully, the immortal culling sword was finally satisfied and stopped devouring his essence energy. Zhou Wen wore the dragon armor and held the immortal culling sword as he walked along the chasm towards the woman. Just as people were sighing at the power of the seraphim, they suddenly realized that the seraphim shadow had turned its head and was looking in a direction as though it was staring at something. Is there something over there? People were somewhat puzzled, but they didn't discover anything suspicious in the scene. There were broken roots and shattered rocks everywhere. Old Su, adjust the satellite's angle and try to see if you can see the end of the chasm, Wei Gu instructed from the bureau. Old Su immediately adjusted the data. Very quickly, the image changed several times in a row. Suddenly, a figure was seen walking in the chasm. Zoom in. Wei Ji's eyes narrowed as he ordered again. Old Su and the staff worked for a while again, and the image was gradually enlarged and became clearer. That's a person. The sword in his hand looks familiar. Human Emperor. After Old Su saw the scene clearly, he immediately jumped up from the control chair and pointed at the screen, unable to close his mouth for a long time. Interesting. Wei Gu narrowed his eyes and thought. Moments later, Wei Gu gave another order. Send the signal to the Federal Freedom Investigation Bureau. Aren't they doing a live broadcast? Contact them first and get them to use our signal source. Although they were puzzled as to why Wei Gu was doing this, Wei Ji's words were like an imperial edict in the bureau. No one dared to question him. Old Su immediately contacted the Federal Freedom Investigation Bureau. When the editor-in-chief of the Federal Freedom Investigation Bureau saw the signal image sent by Old Sue, he also jumped up from his chair. His fat body had never been this agile as he stood on the chair and pointed at the screen for a long time before saying, "Holy sh*T. Human Emperor." Chapter 1276. After slaying Tion, there was probably no one among humans who didn't recognize the immortal culling sword. Although there were already many people selling imitations in the Federation, to be able to go to Venus with such a sword and even dare to enter the Calamity-grade battlefield, the possibility of him being human sovereign was undoubtedly very high. Heavens, boss, is this really human sovereign? The staff members beside him were excited. The possibility is very high. To be able to appear in a place like Venus, and it's a signal source given by the Bureau. Immediately switch the signal source. Right. I have to be more cautious. The press release will use suspected later, soon, the new media, the Federation Freedom Investigation Bureau, began operating at full speed. Before long, the people who were watching the other media outlets turned to the Federation Freedom Investigation Bureau because they heard a name. Holy sh*T. Is this really human sovereign? That sword looks like it. To be able to go to a place like Venus and dare to go to a Calamity-grade battlefield, I really can't think of anyone other than human sovereign. Heavens, human sovereign is finally out again. It's been 5 years. He's finally here again. What's human sovereign going there for? It looks like he's walking towards Seraph. No way. Could it be? No. The angels' believers felt extremely complicated at this moment. Human sovereign was the spiritual pillar of humanity, but angels were also their faith and spiritual pillar. No matter what, they didn't wish to see the scene they guessed happen. However, what was to come would come. Everyone could tell that human sovereign was walking towards Seraph, and Seraph's shadow was staring at human sovereign. This fellow hasn't done anything for a few years, but he caused such a huge commotion the moment he came out. Does he like to be in the limelight that much? Xia Luchuan said with a strange expression. Does he still need to cause trouble to be in the limelight? Zhang Chuanxiu shook his head. That's true. Xia Luchuan thought for a long time and said helplessly. If human sovereign really wanted to be in the limelight, he didn't need to cause any trouble. What does he want? In the League of Defender, Cave Era, Hermit, and company had complicated expressions. They were both respectful and afraid of human sovereign. From the standpoint of humanity, they believed that human sovereign had indeed fought for humanity and preserved the last bit of face for humanity in front of dimensional creatures. However, they were now in the League of Defender, but they were working for the dimension. Without a doubt, they were standing on the opposite side of human sovereign. Xian just sat there and watched. No expression could be seen on his face. His gaze did not change either. No one knew what he was thinking. That guy finally couldn't stand the loneliness anymore. In the Holy Ghost Society's president's office, Zhong Zia wore a white bathrobe and hugged a sword as he sat by the window. He had a glass of wine in his hand and was watching the live broadcast. The number of viewers of the Federation Freedom Investigation Bureau skyrocketed. As long as one had access to the internet, more than 70% of them were watching the live broadcast of the Federation Freedom Investigation Bureau. The attraction of the word human emperor was too great. Zhouwen didn't know that so many people were watching him. Even if he knew, he wouldn't take it to heart. All he wanted to do now was see if the immortal culling sword could slay that woman and end this scourge. Now, the only thing he was worried about was that the woman would run away when she saw the immortal culling sword in his hand. After all, too many people had seen this immortal culling sword and knew how powerful it was. Zhouwen was clearly overthinking things. The woman didn't know about the immortal culling sword because she had been in the hut for a long period of time. She didn't know about the battle where he slew Tion, so she naturally didn't know how powerful the immortal culling sword was. Seeing that Zhou wasn't dead, the woman frowned slightly. She raised the blazing sword again and slashed at Zhou, who was walking over from the chasm. Using the six-winged seraph state drained her greatly. She had to resolve it as soon as possible, otherwise the consequences would be dire. Now, all she wanted to do was kill Zhou as soon as possible. At the corner of the woman's eyes, there were already some fine lines, making her look at least 10 years older than before. This was already a sign that something was wrong with her body. This strike was even more terrifying than the previous 2 strikes. As time passed, the six-winged seraph's strength continued increasing. The sword beam pointed at the sky as though it wanted to split the cosmos apart. When it slashed down, it gave off a strong visual impact. It was as though even Venus would be split into 2 by this strike. Ah! Those who were concerned about human emperor couldn't help but worry when they saw such a terrifying attack. Some of the more timid women didn't even dare watch. They turned their heads and waited nervously for the outcome. Human emperor is still human after all. He shouldn't be enemies with blazing angel. That's a true apostle of God. The archbishop muttered to himself. In the end, most believers still felt that their faith was more important and more powerful. Ordinary eyes couldn't keep up with the speed of the sword beam. All they could see was the terrifying sword beam cleaving into the ground like a watermelon. The entire world seemed to be illuminated by the sword beam's brilliance, preventing them from seeing anything. Buzz! A sword hum resounded through the universe. In the world that was almost occupied by the sword beam, a black rift tore open. The rift traversed the sky like a straight black line on a piece of white paper. Crack! The white paper split apart and the sword beam also collapsed. Everyone's vision returned to normal. Human Emperor was still standing in his spot. His hand was still holding the hilt of his saber, as though he had never moved. The six-winged angel in the sky was also motionless, as though it had never moved. Just when people were wondering what was going on, they suddenly saw the angel's shadow shatter like glass. A figure fell from it. It was a woman with 6 wings and a halo above her head. She looked like an angel. However, she didn't look like a noble angel at the moment. She was covered in blood. 4 of the angel's wings on her back had been cut off. Her body was also broken into 2. She fell straight into the depths of the Rift Valley. Impossible! The archbishop was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Those believers who were still holding on to their faith felt like something was collapsing in their hearts. They were speechless and could only stare blankly at the live broadcast. Human Emperor is invincible. He even killed Blazing Angel with 1 strike. He's too powerful. Haha, what angel or devil? They can't even compare to my sword. Your Majesty, please finish the Venus dungeon while you're at it. You're the only one who deserves the first place. People were ecstatic. Although most of them didn't even have the ability to fight, they felt a sense of victory because of the name Human Emperor. In the League of Defender, Hermit and the others had ugly expressions. They subconsciously touched their waists. They were very worried that Human Emperor's sword would cut their waists next time. Many people were going to have insomnia tonight. Chapter 1277. Zhou felt his body collapse. With so many external forces replenishing him, using the immortal culling sword still placed quite a burden on his body. Thankfully, he was only a little weak this time. It was much better than the previous time. He didn't injure his body, so it wasn't too much of a hindrance. As he circulated the Tao Sutra, essence energy surged over endlessly, recovering a lot. With the immortal culling sword in hand, he flew towards the Rift Valley. Although it was unlikely that a creature struck by the immortal culling sword could survive, Zhou still wanted to take a look with his own eyes just in case. It was best if he could deliver another 2 strikes to end the woman's chances of survival. Zhou flew down the Rift Valley and saw the woman's severed body. Her vitality had been severed. The reason why the immortal culling sword was terrifying wasn't just because it was powerful. Even if the creatures killed by it had powerful self-healing or resurrection abilities, the chances of them surviving were very low. Otherwise, how could it be used to kill immortals? Those immortals all had the art of longevity, so it wasn't difficult for them to have self-healing abilities. However, to Zhou Wen's surprise, the woman's body's vitality had been severed, but her head still emitted vitality. Her soul hadn't been wiped away by the power of the immortal culling sword. Zhou Wen clearly saw the woman's eyes widen. On her forehead there was a tiny red lip mark. The lip mark was extremely cute. It should have come from a child and not an adult. At that moment, the lip mark shimmered with a strange glow as it resisted the power of the immortal culling sword, allowing the woman to retain a sliver of life. Her body had already begun to rot, but her head was still alive. Her head flew up in a bid to escape. Unfortunately, with only her head left, she was clearly no longer as powerful as a calamity grade. Her speed couldn't be fast. With transcendent flying immortal, Zhou Wen slashed at the woman's head with the sheathed immortal culling sword, chopping it off. Unfortunately, an unsheathed immortal culling sword was just a hard metal rod. Zhou Wen's full-powered strike failed to shatter the woman's head. The head landed on the ground, shattering a large portion of the rocky ground as it sank into the rock. Due to Zhou Wen's strike, the lip mark on her forehead was damaged. The luster on it gradually dimmed, and the vitality on her head weakened. The flesh on her neck had already begun to rot. What's the origin of that lip mark? It can actually withstand the power of the immortal slaughtering sword? Zhou Wen was somewhat surprised, but now wasn't the time to think about this. He wanted to kill the woman completely and not leave any trouble behind. The woman seemed to know that she was doomed. She shouted at Zhou Wen, "No matter who you are, no matter where you are doomed. In the heavens and earth, in the endless universe, no matter where you lie, Master will avenge me and send you to the endless hell, never to be reincarnated. Lowly human. Soon you will know what is the true horror of this world." As the woman screamed, her head suddenly exploded with intense holy light. The shockwave created instantly destroyed everything in the surroundings. The intense light caused the images sent back by the satellite to be blazing white, and nothing could be seen. The light continued without diminishing, as if it was an eternal holy radiance. Zhou Wen teleported away, and wasn't affected by the self-destruction. Although he was still enveloped by the light's power couldn't damage the dragon prisoner armor at this distance. However, Zhou Wen was somewhat surprised. With the woman's strength, he believed that she was an extremely powerful existence even in the dimension. However, from her tone, she was only a servant. How powerful was her master? An apocalyptic grade? Zhou Wen guessed inwardly. However, so what if she's at the apocalyptic grade? The apocalyptic experts in the dimension don't dare to enter Earth personally. Zhou Wen thought of the metal flower and teleported nearby to see if it was completely dead. If it wasn't completely dead, he could take the opportunity to stab it twice. Perhaps a dimensional crystal would drop. It would be great if a companion egg dropped. He didn't have a calamity-grade companion beast. When he arrived at the flower, he saw that most of the metal flower's roots had been severed. Its leaves had been chopped off, leaving only the flower stem and flowers on the ground. The metallic luster had faded, making it look like it couldn't survive. Seeing that the metal flower was in such a state, Zhou Wen didn't even need to stab it. Just as he was about to pick up the petals to see if they were useful, he suddenly felt the mysterious phone vibrate as though it was about to appear. Could it be? Zhou Wen's heart stirred as he scanned the area with his perception. He didn't discover any other creatures nearby, and due to the existence of the holy radiance, nothing could be seen from the outside. He took out his phone to take a look. Indeed, the dead man tree automatically appeared and took a picture of the metal flower. The metal flower's corpse and countless roots instantly vanished. As for the dead man tree, there was an additional flower bud. Strange. Doesn't the dead man tree only absorb special humans? Why would it absorb this metal flower? Zhouwen found it increasingly odd. However, it was ultimately a good thing. Without staying any longer, Zhouwen teleported back to Earth. The people who were watching the live broadcast saw that the painting had always been blazing white. The temperature of Venus was already very high, and the temperature there was even higher. It turned into a blazing white color like a huge white lake of sacred flames. It burned incessantly for dozens of years without being extinguished. From space, it looked like a flashing white eye. Later on, people named the holy flame lake on Venus the Eye of Human Emperor to commemorate Human Emperor's battle. At the instant the woman's head exploded, the red lip mark transformed into a stream of light and vanished. In an ancient castle somewhere in the universe, a golden-haired girl was lying in a crystal coffin. She was wearing a white one-piece pajamas, and her face was rosy. She looked like she was asleep. Suddenly, red lips appeared on the crystal coffin lid. The girl was jolted awake, and when she saw the red lip mark on the crystal coffin lid, her eyes immediately revealed a sad expression. Yana is dead? The girl pushed open the crystal coffin lid and the red lip mark automatically flew in and landed on her mouth. The girl bit her lips as her eyes gradually turned resolute, as though she had made an important decision. Little mistress, why are you awake? A giant more than 10 meters tall in a maid costume came in front of the crystal coffin and knelt down, allowing her face to approach the crystal coffin as she carefully asked softly. Yana is dead, the girl said sadly. Which Yana? Oh, I remember. It's that dirty little maid. She's already been chased out. It's fine if she's dead. It's not worth your concern, little mistress, the giant maid said indifferently. Chapter 1278. But Yana is my friend, the little girl said. The giant maid immediately said, Young master, Yana is only a low-level creature in the ancient seal. How can she have the right to be your friend? When you were touring the ancient seal, you made her your maidservant. It's already a great blessing for her to be by your side and serve you. She didn't know her place and actually wanted to be your friend. She even stole something from you. She deserves death. But, the little girl moved her mouth as though she wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. She hugged a panda doll that was about the same height as her and lay down again. After closing her eyes, she said, Little chrysanthemum, I'm tired. I want to rest. You can leave. Yes, young master. The giant maid carefully closed the coffin lid again before quietly leaving the room, as though afraid that she would disturb the girl's rest. After the giant maid left, the girl opened her eyes again. She blinked her large eyes and secretly opened the crystal coffin lid before climbing out. After taking a few steps, she seemed to think of something. She looked back at the empty crystal coffin and then at the panda doll in her arms. Finally, she reluctantly placed the panda doll into the crystal coffin. Don't worry. I'll be back soon after I resolve Yana's matter. As the little girl spoke, she reached out and kissed the panda on the forehead, leaving a tiny and cute lip mark on it. In an instant, the panda doll transformed into a little girl and lay peacefully in the crystal coffin. People originally imagined that Human Emperor would head to the Venus dimensional zone and obtain first place, but that didn't happen. Human Emperor vanished after slaying the six-winged seraphim. After Zhouwen returned to Earth, his luck was rather bad. He arrived in a desolate swamp with many dimensional zones around him. He was thinking of a way to return to a human city. At the very least, he needed to go to a place with the internet to know if any creatures would head to the Venus dimensional zone again. However, before Zhouwen could return to human territory, a creature had already entered the Venus dimensional zone. This time, the person who entered the Venus dimensional zone was the black-winged angel he had previously met. He wasn't as noble as Yana, nor was he as holy. It had a pair of black wings with a few strands of white hair in the middle. It wasn't wearing any armor, but rather a robe that didn't look very clean, similar to what a priest would wear when working. The magic cube lit up. When people saw that it wasn't human emperor who had entered the dimensional zone, they couldn't help but feel disappointed. However, what happened next shocked everyone. The black-winged angel held a black book. After entering the Venus dimensional zone, he didn't even raise his head when facing the bullets fired by the metal guards. All he did was calmly flip open the black book. Then there was nothing. People only saw him flip through the book. No one saw what happened next. The metal guard and his bullets disappeared. This plot kept repeating. The metal guards, the Golden War God, appeared one after another before disappearing inexplicably. Until the last calamity bullet was shot, people only saw the black-winged angel flip open the book. They didn't see how the black-winged angel entered the maze or arrived at the Golden Palace. He was already standing there. The Rubik's Cube once again appeared on the leaderboard. The second place on the leaderboard had the word Fallen. Behind Fallen were 4 golden stars. Professor Gu, what do you think of the newly appeared Fallen? Everyone in the Federation hated the Fallen, so the FBI was naturally doing a program about the Fallen. Professor Gu said, the situation now is rather clear. Only creatures that reach the Golden Palace can be ranked on the ranking. Up to now, there are a total of 2 on the ranking. The first is Tsukuyomi, with 5 stars behind her. The second is Fallen, with 4 stars behind her. Therefore, he's ranked second, while Tsukuyomi is ranked first. The number of stars should be the standard for ranking. Many people believe that Tsukuyomi is weaker than the Fallen from their performance through dimensional zones, but her ranking is above the Fallen. What do you think of this? The host asked again. On the surface, it's true that Fallen looks more powerful and mysterious. As for Tsukuyomi, she even received the help of the King of Scavengers to reach the Golden Palace. However, this doesn't mean that Fallen is really stronger than Tsukuyomi. From the looks of it, Fallen's abilities are still unknown. It's hard to determine what happened after she flipped open the black-covered book. Everything is still hard to say, Professor Gu said ambiguously. Only when Zhou returned to the human zone did he learn about Fallen. However, there was clearly no benefit to be gained this time. It was useless even if he returned early. Zhou continued grinding in-game. He grinded the Gold Star dungeon once a day, hoping to find a way to clear it. Zhou even tried using the Dragon Prisoner armor to block the Calamity Grade bullet. He really did it. Although it was filled with bullet holes and dents, it ultimately didn't penetrate it. Of course, this was only the first 6 bullets. When it came to the 7th bullet, it blew off the blood-colored avatar's head. Even absolute defense couldn't block it. It's already quite impressive to be able to block 6 Calamity-grade bullets. From the looks of it, I still need to think of another way to deal with the 7th bullet. Zhou took out the space-time pig crystal he had obtained in the Chaos Hut. I hope it's the spatial stretching skill. Zhou absorbed it. A mythical crystal that was spatial, so Zhou easily met the absorption requirements. Seeing the space-time pig crystal fuse into his body and open up a new essence energy cycle in his body, Zhou vaguely felt that his wish had come true. Absolute space. Mythical. After careful study, Zhou realized that this was indeed an ability similar to spatial stretching, but it was still somewhat different. This ability couldn't really stretch space. It could only create a strange space, absolute space. In absolute space, space could be changed. Absolute space was like a map space. It had a proportional conversion relationship with real space. In reality, it looked like a meter long. After becoming absolute space, it still looked like a meter long, but in fact, this space had become 1,000 meters long. In fact, Zhou couldn't do this. He had just learned absolute space and could only reach a ratio of 1 to 10. Furthermore, the absolute space he could create was only the size of an egg. With such a small absolute space, even if the space inside is 10 times larger than in reality, it's impossible for it to block Calamity Grade bullet. Zhouwen knew that he had to raise absolute space to the terregrade to have a sliver of hope. No matter how small the hope was, it was still hope. Zhouwen began practicing. Chapter 1279. As he had already cultivated 2 spatial elemental essence energy arts, Zhouwen was rather familiar with spatial powers. He could even be said to be proficient in them. Although he had never come into contact with absolute space before, Zhouwen quickly learned how it operated after understanding it. Furthermore, he was rapidly improving. In just a day, absolute space, which was originally the size of an egg, had become a cubic meter in size. Furthermore, the space inside was hundreds of times larger than the space outside. Although it looked like it was only a meter away, in fact, after an object entered, it would have to travel hundreds of meters to pass through absolute space. A distance of a few hundred meters was enough to fight ordinary opponents, but it was far from enough to fight a calamity-grade expert. With the speed of light, the difference between a few hundred meters and a few thousand meters wasn't much. Zhouwen had to think of a way to extend absolute space to slow down the calamity-grade attack by a tiny bit so that he could dodge it. In the next few days, Zhouwen constantly pondered over how to make absolute space stronger. However, when the difference between absolute space and the actual distance reached about 1,000 meters, he couldn't continue improving it. Zhouwen knew that he had reached a bottleneck. The bottleneck of a mythical skill. He had to surpass the mythical stage to continue growing and make absolute space stronger. Li Xian had nothing to do, so he came to drink and chat with Zhouwen. When he saw Zhouwen frowning, he asked curiously, "It's rare to see you with such an expression. What happened?" "I'm thinking about how to raise a skills level and make it stronger," Zhouwen answered. "That's easy. Just train and think more." As Li Xian spoke, he asked, "What skill do you want to raise? What's the original level of the skill? Tell me and I'll help you think of a solution." "Spatial attribute. It's now at the mythical stage," Zhouwen said. "It's indeed very difficult to advance a mythical skill. Furthermore, it's a spatial attribute that's very difficult to begin with. It's no wonder you're worried. How about this? I have a solution. Go to dimensional zones with spatial creatures and fight them. Experience their spatial powers. Perhaps you can gain some insights and break through to the terregrade." Li Xian shared his experience. In the past 5 years, he had been constantly fighting, being beaten, and being tortured. That was why he had his present achievements. Zhouwen sighed and said, "It's not difficult to advance to the terregrade. I just need to wait another 2 days, but I'm afraid that the terregrade skill still won't meet my requirements. It will be difficult to improve further." A dark cloud hung over Li Xian's head as he said gloomily, "Can we still have a proper chat? Do you think the level of a terregrade skill isn't high enough? Do you want to ascend to the heavens? There's no other way. If I want to venture into the Venus dimensional zone, I have to master this skill," Zhouwen said. "You want to use this spatial skill to dodge calamity-grade bullets?" Li Xian guessed what Zhouwen was up to. Zhouwen nodded and said, "This is the only way to reach the Golden Palace before being killed by a calamity-grade bullet. Then take your time training. I don't know how to make my skill reach the calamity grade. Speaking of which, you should only be at the mythical stage, right?" Li Xian said. "Sigh, it's indeed too difficult." Zhouwen also knew that his level was too low. If he was at the terregrade, he might still have a chance of advancing absolute space to the calamity grade. Zhouwen was also worried about this problem. If the absolute space at the terregrade didn't meet his requirements, it would probably be very difficult for him to advance to the calamity grade. However, Zhouwen still had no idea how he could advance to the terregrade. This time, his 4 stats were at 81 points, and his 8 essence energy arts had transformed into the terror form. However, Slaughterer didn't move. He couldn't transform into the terror form no matter what. "If I need to kill to advance, then I've even killed a calamity, but there's no reaction at all. What logic is this? Do I have to kill the guardian? Zhou vaguely felt that things weren't that simple. Wishful thinking. A man's voice sounded. And Sheng walked into the yard with Tianzua. The person who had spoken was Tianzua. And Tianzua wasn't far from the yard. His hearing was extremely good, so he heard the conversation between Li Xian and Zhou Wen clearly. He knew that Zhou Wen wanted to advance a mythical skill to the calamity grade, and it was spatial. Although he wasn't speaking to Zhou Wen, anyone could tell that he was talking about him. Zhou Wen pretended not to hear him and ignored Tianzua. He looked at Sheng and asked, Sheng, why are you so free? Why did you come to me? Young Master One, here's the thing. Overseer and I have been purchasing essence crystal ores recently. You know how much those things require essence crystals. All the essence crystals that can be bought have been plundered by us. Even if the other families have the goods, they are waiting for a good price in this situation. It's impossible for them to easily sell them to us. Therefore, Overseer and I plan on heading out to open up a dimensional zone that might have a essence crystal mine. Sheng paused before saying, You know the situation in Luoyang recently. All the major factions are watching this place. I wonder how many spies are in the city. Once we go out, if anything happens, we need a man to take care of the house. Do you think it's convenient for you to take care of the house temporarily? How long will it take? Zhou Wen asked after some thought. If he wanted to take care of this place, he definitely couldn't leave Luoyang before Sheng and company returned. That's hard to say. If we're fast, we can be back in about a week. If something unexpected happens, it's hard to say. We'll try our best to rush back in a month, Sheng said. A month? Zhou Wen frowned slightly. If any creatures entered the Venus dimensional zone in a month, he wouldn't be able to take advantage of them. Sheng, tell him not to stay. There's no need to force him, Tianzua said expressionlessly. Tianzua was standing on the other side, so Zhou Wen could naturally hear him. Tianzua naturally knew, but he didn't speak to Zhou Wen directly. What Overseer means is that if you have something to do, there's no need to force yourself. We'll think of another way. It's just that Madame feels that she can rely on her own people and doesn't want outsiders to come to her house. And Sheng relayed the message. It sounded like what Tianzua had said, but it also felt like it wasn't the same thing. Please help me tell that Overseer that if he wants me to stay, I definitely won't force him. However, this matter concerns Sislan and my father, so I won't ignore it, Zhou Wen said. Overseer, young Master Wen said that he's also Madame's son. He'll definitely take care of Madame and won't let anything happen to the family. And Sheng wiped the sweat from his forehead as he translated. Chapter 1280. Tell him to do things properly. Don't think about all those random and unrealistic things all day. If something happens to the family because of this, I won't spare him easily if anything happens to that person at home, little Jing, and Tianzua said. Young Master One, the various families have been keeping a close eye on our family recently. Furthermore, those spies are everywhere. In order to obtain the secret of the accelerator, they might do anything. They might even take advantage of our absence to attack you, Madam, and Miss Jing to threaten us. The Overseer is very worried about your safety. You have to be careful. It's fine if an prefecture is damaged. If necessary, you can abandon an prefecture. It's fine as long as everyone is fine. And Tianzua glared at Sheng as though he was saying, Did I say that much? Tell the Overseer that since I've agreed, I will naturally ensure their safety. There's no need for him to put in too much effort. It's best to ask him to put in more effort and think of a way to obtain the primordial crystal mine, Zhou Wen said. Tell him that it's none of his business. Help me tell him that he doesn't need to care about my business. Li Xian watched with his mouth agape. He had seen arguments before, but he had never seen such an argument. Well, can you speak for yourselves? And Xing's translator's head was about to explode. He couldn't hold it in any longer. Humph. And Tianzhua turned around and left without looking at Zhou. He left the yard with Xing. After Tianzhua left, Li Xian patted Zhou on the shoulder and sighed in sympathy. Old Zhou, your days in the family aren't easy either. When he was at home, he had often been rebuked by Li Mabai. However, he wasn't as bold as Zhou to oppose Tianzhua. There's nothing bad about it. Just don't treat him as a human, Zhou said without a change in expression as he held his teacup. Pfft! Li Xian spat out the mouthful of tea he had just drunk. He was probably the only person in the Federation who dared to not treat Tianzhua as a human. As Tianzhua walked, he said, frivolous, arrogant, conceited, and ignorant. He thinks he's great just because he has some small achievements. If we humans are all such people, what right do we have to fight the dimension? And Xing didn't dare to speak. He just followed Tianzhua and listened. Why aren't you saying anything? Tianzhua stopped and turned to look at Xing when he saw that Xing didn't say a word. Overseer, you are right, Xing hurriedly said with his head lowered. Your words don't match your heart. That's not what you think, Tianzhua snorted coldly. Xing wanted to explain, but Tianzhua interrupted him. I don't want to hear a perfunctory explanation. Don't do this and that. Just tell me, does that guy make people angry just by looking at him? Tianzhua interrupted him again. I think young Master One thinks so too. Xing thought to himself, but he didn't dare say it out loud. That's right. Young Master One is too much. How can he only think for Madame Anye? He also has to think for you and Miss Jing. Tianzhua stopped again and glared fiercely at Xing as he said coldly, who said that he should think of me and little Jing? Do we need him to think of us? Xing could only lower his head and smile obsequiously. There's definitely no need. I was just saying. If you can't control your tongue, I don't mind helping you control it. Soak it in formalin. It should be obedient and not spout nonsense, Tianzhua said with a cold expression. Xing hurriedly covered his face with his hand, as though he was indicating that he definitely wouldn't spout nonsense. Please spare his tongue. Only then did Tianzhua continue walking in satisfaction. After leaving Overseer Manor, Tianzhua came to the car. Xing opened the back door and covered the door frame with his hand. However, Tianzhua didn't get in. Instead, he walked to the driver's seat and opened the door himself. He didn't immediately get in. He stopped and said to Xing, the information that was sent to teacher previously has been sent back, right? Xing thought for a moment and realized that he hadn't sent any information recently, so he said, the most recent information sent to teacher was sent back more than a month ago. It was personally sent back by Principal Lung. Have you forgotten? Yes, teacher has seen the information. It's useless. Throw it all away. Go deal with it. With that said, Tianzhua got into the car and drove away. Throw it away? Xing was slightly taken aback. The information wasn't ordinary information. It was an authentic stone monument found in a mysterious dimensional zone. Ignoring the content on it, even the stone monuments themselves were very precious items. Although Lung Zongjing had sent back a handwritten copy, the handwritten copy was even more important. Xing remembered that Lung Zongjing had said that the content recorded on it was useless to ordinary people, but to a spatial expert like him, it was extremely precious. Back then, Lung Zongjing had left behind the original version and specially made a copy for him. The content was the same, but there were Lung Zongjing's annotations, and Tianzhua had specially kept it in his private collection room. On second thought, Xing immediately understood something. He revealed a look of understanding and hurriedly turned around to return to the family. He was the only one who could enter Tianzhua's private collection room. After Li Xian left, he continued studying absolute space. It was only a matter of time before he broke through to the terregrade, but the more he studied, the more he felt that it was difficult for absolute space to play the role he imagined if he was only at the terregrade. Is young Master Wen around? And Xing knocked on Zhou Wen's door. Didn't you leave? Why are you back? Zhou Wen opened the door and asked Xing in puzzlement. Not yet. There's some information here. It was copied and annotated by Chancellor Lung. Take a look and see if it's useful. And Xing handed 4 thick diaries to Zhou Wen. Chancellor Lung copied and annotated it? Zhou Wen took the diary and casually flipped through a few pages. He was immediately fascinated by the content. Where did this come from? Zhou Wen asked as he flipped through it. I heard that someone obtained it from a mysterious dimensional zone. I'm not too sure about the exact situation. If it's useful, take a look first. And Xing opened his mouth as though he wanted to say something, but after some hesitation, he didn't say anything. He bade farewell and left. This is clearly the insights and experiences of a spatial bigshot. I'm afraid the person who wrote this might very well be a calamity-grade expert. For Chancellor Lung to be able to explain and annotate it to such an extent, his understanding of spatial powers must be extremely unfathomable. Zhou Wen was somewhat surprised by the contents. Furthermore, he also knew why he had to copy it by hand and not use electronic equipment to store it. The artistic conception contained in every stroke was something that electronic equipment couldn't produce. It wasn't enough to just look at the content. He also had to look at the artistic conception of these words. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.